Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. My wife and I found a door in the middle of the woods. What the hell? What is it, honey? My wife's voice called out from behind me. It's a door. She laughed. Did you break into the pot stash early? We're in the middle of the woods. Why would there be a... Oh, huh. Karen stopped as she saw it, and we stood shoulder to shoulder looking at it, an old wooden door built into the side of a hill in the middle of nowhere. It really is crazy what you can find out on these expeditions sometimes, huh, honey? She grinned. Should we knock? I shook my head. I'm not really sure I want to meet the kind of person that lives inside a hill. Oh, come on. Karen punched my shoulder. Where's your sense of adventure? Karen strode up to the door and gave it a polite knock. Hello. I'm looking for a Mr. Beard, a Mr. Treebeard. I chuckled as I shook my head. Karen never let me forget the little wonderful things about her that made me fall in love with her. She turned to me in mock disappointment. I don't think anybody's home, honey, she said. All right, come on, I said. We've got enough shrooms for now. Let's find a good place to trip. Are you kidding? God, I married the most boring man in the universe. We've got to go inside. What if someone lives there? What if somebody lives in a hill in the woods? I think the man who built his house underground in a forest will be understanding if we offer to share some of our pot with him. You assume that just because he lives in a hill he smokes pot. I don't know, Karen, that's pretty racist. Racist? Against who? Tree people, obviously. Who else? Karen laughed and punched me in the shoulder again. I feigned being hurt, even though I loved it when she did that. All right, I finally agreed. After all, if I didn't completely ignore common sense sometimes, I wouldn't be married to you in the first place. You're really funny. After I kick you out of the house, maybe you can live with Mr. Treebeard out here in the woods. I chuckled and tried the knob. The door was unlocked. As we pushed it open, we were greeted by a damp, mossy smell. The room inside was pitch black, but it seemed to be made entirely of rock, not dirt like I had expected. Hold on a second, I said, sliding the pack off onto the ground and fumbling around inside for the flashlight. I flipped it on and scanned the walls. What the... The walls were all covered in some sort of nonsensical carvings. It reminded me of when we'd studied Egyptian hieroglyphics in school. What is this, Wingdings? Karen joked. I didn't answer. I had gotten the sudden feeling that I was being watched. I swung the flashlight to the back wall, only to discover that there wasn't one. The passage continued on and sloped downwards until the flashlight beam ended on the ceiling about 30 feet away. Karen, I think we should. Hold on. What's that? Karen pointed to a dark spot on the floor, and I pointed the flashlight down to illuminate it. It was some kind of black liquid. Motor oil? I joked. But Karen's wasn't joking around. She knelt down to look at the puddle. It's blood, Danny, she said. And look, it's leading down inside. I tilted the flashlight up. She was right. There was a blood trail leading deeper into the cavern. It's probably just an animal, I said. We should go. But Karen was already tying her hair up the way she did at work. She cupped her hands to her mouth. Hello, she called out. I heard the call echo down the chamber, which must have been much larger than we had originally thought. Is anybody down there? Silence. But then a barely audible call answered. Help. The call sounded like it was coming from deep within the cavern. When I heard it, all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and there was a sinking feeling in my chest. My every instinct started telling me to get the fuck out of this place. Karen, it could be some sort of trap, I said. Let's call the park rangers and then get the fuck out of here. Somebody's hurt down there, Danny, she said sternly. But then her expression softened a bit. Sorry, honey, this is what you got yourself into when you decided to marry a nurse. I sighed. I knew there was no stopping Karen when she had set her mind to do something, but I kept a tight grip on the heavy mag flashlight as we proceeded down the passageway. The blood trail got thinner as we walked deeper into the cavern. Whoever it was must have lost most of their blood in the antechamber. But if they were hurt out there, why had they retreated further into the cavern? Why not go outside where they had a chance of being found? It didn't make any sense. The air grew hotter and more humid as we went further down the increasingly steep slope, and a pungent smell of mold invaded our nostrils. I coughed as I breathed the horrid air. Where did all this dust come from? The deeper sections of the cavern walls had been cracked open by tree roots that had burrowed their way through the stone. "What the fuck is this place?" I whispered to Karen. "Maybe some sort of makeshift survival bunker," she guessed. She cupped her hands to her mouth again. "Hello." Her shout echoed down the hallway. "If you can hear us, stay calm. We're going to help you get out to safety." She help? The voice was a little louder this time. We must be getting closer, I thought. But the sense of revulsion I felt on hearing the voice only got worse. Did she not feel it? As we went deeper inside, we found where the blood trail ended. There was a long smear of it on the ground. It looked like somebody had been dragged across the floor while bleeding heavily. And then it just stopped. Not even a drop after that. The walls of the cavern had now been almost completely overrun by roots, and breathing was getting difficult as the air had grown hotter and more choked with dust. "Tacetas, he help." The voice was very close now, and I could now make it out more clearly. It sounded strange, all breathy and raspy, like a crude imitation of what a person should sound like. The floor had now become so steep it was impossible to go any further without risking a fall into God knows what. "We've got to get down to him somehow." Karen wheezed out. She must have been having even more trouble breathing in the hot, thick dust than me. "I've got it," I said. "You step back." I pulled out the length of rope we'd brought in our emergency gear and tied it to one of the thick roots springing through the walls of the cave. I gave it a few firm tugs to make sure it was secure before tying the other end around my waist. I'd never wanted to turn around and go home so badly, but I knew there was no way Karen would leave without seeing this through. I started the climb down carefully, leaning over and moving the flashlight around to try to see what was going on without slipping and falling. I could see the vague outline of a man in the darkness, and I swung the flashlight beam over him. My blood went cold. "Karen, run." "What?" "Run." My breath was knocked out as the rope yanked back against my waist. I hoped it was Karen pulling, but I knew it wasn't. She wasn't that strong. I landed on the ground hard, and the rope continued to pull me backwards. "Danny, what the fuck is?" "Run, god damn it." She started to back away as the roots on the walls all started to move, slowly snaking their way towards us. I sawed through the rope with my pocket knife and stumbled forward into a sprint, yanking Karen along with me. She wouldn't have hesitated if she'd seen what I had. At the bottom of the cavern, a man had been suspended above the ground in a giant web of roots that were writhing and sliding through him. Little bulges were moving slowly up the roots that led away from his collapsed and shriveled body, one root jutting into his throat and twisting around every time he called for help. The plant was working his voice box like a puppet. We abandoned our flashlight and gear bag in the cave behind us as we sprinted towards the exit in total darkness, hacking and coughing as the moldy, dusty air of the cavern filled our lungs. I could feel myself tripping on roots that had not been there on the way in. I felt a yank on my hand as Karen fell, and we both tumbled down onto the writhing roots which circled around our limbs and began to drag us backwards. I started hacking desperately at them with my pocket knife. The roots recoiled as I struck them, and I managed to free my legs. I pulled at Karen's hands, but the roots were stronger. "Just leave me," she shouted at me. "Fuck no." I swung blindly at her legs, and the knife connected with a sick thud. I swung a dozen more times, slashing her legs once by mistake before she was loose enough to yank free. We kept running towards the door, and I could feel the air getting cooler and fresher and the floor beginning to level out. We'd almost made it. I could see the outline of light around the door now. We ran full force into it, ricocheting off and bouncing back onto the ground. I scrambled up. "Please be open." I grabbed the knob and yanked, and a torrent of fresh air and sunlight poured into the cavern. I grabbed Karen's arm and half-dragged her through open door before collapsing exhausted on the ground. "We made it," I gasped out. My chest was heaving up and down as I lay on my back, coughing up all the dust from the cavern air. "Yeah." Karen was bright red with exhaustion, her arms and legs covered in scratch marks. I don't imagine I looked much better. "What the fuck was that?" I said breathlessly, getting to my feet. Karen shook her head. "I don't know, but let's get the fuck out of here." I helped Karen to her feet, and we both stood there panting and coughing with our hands on our knees. Karen coughed something up into her hand. "Danny?" she said, showing it to me. It was a small leaf. I watched her face as little green tendrils began to spread out and coil around under her skin, and I realized with horror that it hadn't been dust we were breathing in. It had been spores. My father's cabin in the woods burned down. We found something strange in the ruins. So my father used to own a cabin. In fact, he used to own a lot of different properties, which I suppose is just a roundabout way of saying that we grew up with money. Where things get a bit complicated is how he actually made that money. The line that he constantly fed us was that he was an accountant, running his own firm in an office in the city. Long hours, lots of business trips. We never saw him much, and whenever we did, he always seemed tired, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, as if he were always trying to force them to stay open. He was sent off to prison right after I'd finished my first year of college. The sentence? 15 years for washing hundreds of millions of dollars for numerous cartels. 2 weeks after he'd been booked, my mother committed suicide. As it turns out, she had been helping him out through the entire thing and was facing some time herself. I guess she didn't want to deal with all that and took the drastic way out. A few months later, the government had seized pretty much all his property. All of it, except for that cabin in the woods. It took a long time for me to feel normal again, but eventually I managed it. Went back to school and graduated with a good enough GPA, which allowed me to snag some shitty office job a few months later, but it was enough to pay the bills. Fast forward about another year, and I've basically scrubbed that entire sequence of events out of my brain. It took a little bit of therapy, a lot of psychedelics, but I finally did it to the point where I was comfortable enough to go back to that cabin, the one place where I'd see my father for more than a few weeks at a time during our summer trips. I decided to take along 3 of my friends from uni: Jack, Pedro, Randy. We drove down there at the beginning of May. The road leading to the cabin hadn't been maintained at all, and as a result, it had become borderline undrivable. I decided to save my vehicle the stress and parked in a nearby lot, leaving us about a 1.5-mile trek through the woods, which really wasn't so bad. Our time in the cabin was pretty much spent getting drunk and stoned, and by the 3rd night we had completely run out of food. We decided to take the 30-minute walk over to the nearest rest stop where I knew that there was a 24/7 diner. So we go there, eat our meals, and on the way back we notice a burning smell in the woods, as if there was a bonfire raging about nearby. Of course that was a bit strange, given that it was around 2 a.m., but we didn't think too much of it at the time, and we kept walking. It was only when the smell continued to grow stronger as we got closer to the cabin that we understood something was very wrong. Soon it had become suffocating, and we could see the night sky tinged with orange in the near distance. I felt my heart drop into my stomach, and immediately I was sprinting, my worst fear realized as I reached the clearing where the cabin was located. Completely up in flames, plumes of dark smoke blending in with the night. It was a mix of different emotions that hit me all at once, the combination of them creating a sense of dread so deep I hadn't thought it possible. After reeling myself in, I called 911, with the operator telling me that the fire department would be on their way, but wouldn't be able to reach us for at least 30 minutes. The 4 of us walked away from the cabin in silence, getting far enough so that the smoke was no longer scratching at our throats. Around 10 minutes later, we noticed that the orange tinge in the sky had suddenly disappeared, and I mean suddenly, like gone in a single blink. I thought I might been hallucinating, but it was clear from their expressions that my friends were seeing something similar. Cautiously, we started making our way back towards the cabin, noticing that the smoke was no longer heavy in the air, having cleared up considerably. Once we reached the clearing, it had disappeared altogether. I looked ahead, my brain working overtime to comprehend the sight before me. The cabin was no longer on fire, burned to a crisp, sure, but the raging, overwhelming flames that had been consuming it just minutes prior had somehow completely fizzled out. The 4 of us looked between each other, as if to confirm we were all still seeing the same thing. Using a flashlight on my phone to survey the damage, I found pretty much what I'd expected: complete destruction. Absolutely zero hope of recovering anything. I started taking some deep breaths, trying to calm myself down when I heard Pedro yelling out from the other side. "Guys, where the fuck did this thing come from?" We all walked over to him. Nestled in the debris was the corpse of something, a monstrosity. It was about the size of a bear, with the sections of its body that were burnt showing pale, clammy skin with deep cuts etched throughout it, in what looked to be some kind of crude pattern. Its head had been smashed in, leaving nothing but an abnormally wide bottom jaw which was still bearing long black teeth. It had an uncountable number of long, thick arms that it was using to hold something that resembled a human infant, one that appeared to be completely unscathed, devoid of any burn marks. The longer I stared at it, the more that I was convinced I could see it breathing. It was a bizarre enough sight to put us into a near trance. What eventually snapped us out of it was the chanting. It was barely noticeable at first, slowly escalating in pitch until it was clear that there were several human voices shouting in unison. Their tones were animalistic, their words strung together with just the bare beginnings of a rhythm. It sounded like they were speaking English, though I could hardly make out anything they were saying. The strangest part, though, was how quickly it was getting closer to us. Definitely not a walking pace. It was more like a sprint. The four of us shared a quick glance between each other, and immediately there was an understanding. We ran like bats out of hell, tripping over branches, our own feet. But eventually we reached my car, all of us scrambling to pile into it. As I was fumbling for my keys, the chanting had become deafening, to a point that hardly made sense. It sounded as if there were speakers lined up in a circle around us, all blasting that horrible noise. And the second that I had put the keys into the ignition, things went silent. I found myself holding my breath as I looked up, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness until what I was seeing was unmistakable. Several figures standing completely still at the edge of the woods, all human-shaped but far too large to be people. All the air being held in my lungs flooded out with one big exhale, and I slammed the vehicle into drive and took a sharp turn before speeding the hell out of there, refusing to look in the rear view until we had made it into the highway. I drove until I had reached the rest stop, which was now hosting an absurd number of police cars. I parked, got out, and approached one of the cops, asking if they were here because of the fire. The cop shook his head. Fire? No. Has there been a fire? I explained the situation with the cabin to him, deciding to leave out the creature and the chanting for the time being. The cop nodded slowly, his expression remaining largely the same throughout. All right, he said, we'll look into it, and then give you an update in the morning. For tonight, just get a hotel or something. We exchanged numbers and I thanked him. As I began to walk away, he called out to me. Hey, can I ask you something? I turned back around. Yeah, I said, sure. Do you happen to be my dad's named son? For a while I just stared at him. Eventually I nodded. Yeah, he said. I thought I recognized you. I don't understand, I told him. I've never seen you before. The cop took a deep breath before taking a quick look around. Come here, he said. Come close. Tentatively I did so. I can tell you everything. I don't even know everything, but I think you should have the right to know the truth about your father. All of the stuff that's happened here tonight, all of the shit that you've seen, it has something to do with him. He took another look around before continuing. Cartels, right? Was that the story they told you? It's not so creative, but I guess it doesn't have to be creative to be believable. Cause the shit that he was actually mixed up in, he would not believe unless you've seen it for yourself. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. Look, I have your number. I'll be in touch tomorrow morning. This is something I'm curious about as well. Maybe you can give me some answers, point me in the right directions, but not here. So get out of here before people start noticing you, and stay safe. I didn't feel like staying in a hotel that night, so I drove back into the city, dropping everybody off before arriving back at my own apartment. Of course I couldn't sleep that night, my eyes wired open into the morning as I waited for the officer to call. He still hadn't by the time that noon rolled around, and so I tried calling him instead. No answer. Eventually I did receive a call from the police, telling me that my father's cabin had burned down and that it was due to a forest fire. I told them that wasn't possible because there had been no forest fire and that I suspected foul play and wanted it to be investigated. It's already been investigated, are the exact words that the officer told me. Don't worry about it. Just get in touch with insurance. Go over your options. And before I could say anything else, he had hung up on me. It was a mixture of anger and curiosity that compelled me to drive back down there. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't for the road leading towards the rest stop to be blocked altogether. There were 2 cop cars guarding the barrier, with a single officer signaling any vehicles approaching to turn around. I pulled over to the side of the road, and after some careful deliberation, I decided to get out and approach him and ask what was going on, just to see what he might say. When I finished the question, he stared at me for a long time, uncomfortably long. Emergency construction is what he eventually told me. After that encounter, I pretty much dropped trying to figure things out. Some weird things have started happening to me since. Every night, I swear I can hear a baby crying in the apartment across from mine. The apartment that I thought had been occupied by a pair of college kids who definitely do not have children. That cop that was supposed to call me finally did, a few nights ago. When I answered, I was met with dead silence on the other end, nearly 30 seconds of it, until the line clicked dead. There's an abandoned house sitting across the street from my apartment building, one that's supposedly been there for years because the development of the store meant to take its place keeps getting delayed. Somebody has started staring at me through its second-floor window. Whenever I catch them doing it, they're quick to close the blinds so I can never catch any details. But I know that the moment I turn away from it, their eyes are back on me. I can't confirm that any of these things are related, whether it has anything to do with my father. I just know that I don't want to deal with it, and that I want it to end. I inherited a lighthouse in the woods. Today I met the woman with the bleeding eye. My brother killed my mother. He did it in the shadow of the lighthouse. He did it in the dark, where you couldn't see the ivy twisting up the lighthouse bricks, where you couldn't see anything but the night and those things that wished to be seen within it. He split her open at the ribs. He shoveled her insides into his mouth, starting with her lungs before finishing with her heart. I know this because I watched him do it. Wesley smiled at me while he ate, the sweeping beam of the lighthouse casting his features in an ethereal glow. "In doing this for you, little brother," he rasped between mouthfuls. "In doing this for all of us. Someday you'll understand. That was an eternity ago. 30 years give or take, and I still don't understand. I doubt I ever will." I was only 3 years old at the time. What I was doing there with Wesley, how I even got there, I can't recall. It's a labyrinth of memories, a maze I've never stepped inside for fear of losing myself within it. All I know for certain is that Harriet found us, my sister. She wandered down from the cottage calling our names for supper. I remember her lantern bobbing in the black, her light spilling across us, her look of nausea as she saw Wesley's blood-stained teeth and our mother's twitching limbs. The scream she loosed sent ravens flying from afar. Father came running. He appeared with a hatchet, and I think he would take in Wesley's head if the bastard hadn't run. He tore off into the dark. He ran right into the phantom wood, that clutch of pines and oaks we were forbidden to enter, and that was the last time any of us ever saw him. "He's dead," Father told us. "The wood devoured him the same as he devoured her." If you ask my sister, she'll say it wasn't my fault. Harriet insists that there's nothing I could have done, that I was only 3 years old and Wesley was 17, and if I'd so much as made a peep, he'd have killed me too. But Father insists differently. Or at least he did. He's dead now. Harriet found him strung up from a tree, hanging limply in the autumn sunset, his corpse dressed in hungry crows. 2 sticks jutted from his eyes. Sigils had been carved roughly into his cheeks. Pieces of him that belonged inside were spilled out onto the yellow grass, while his intestines wound a twisting trail toward the phantom wood. "I won't follow them," Harriet wrote in her letter. "The intestines. I know that's what it wants me to do, whatever killed him. I saw him speaking with the decrepit one recently, down by the creek, but you don't think that she could be involved, do you?" The implication sent a shiver across my spine. The decrepit one was a creature my family knew well, an ancient being that held vast, terrifying power. She had long sought control of our land, our lighthouse, and I hated to think of what she might do if she got that, but this didn't sound like her. The decrepit one cared little for theatrics. She took lives with ruthless efficiency, not ritual torment. This was different. Whatever had killed Father had done so with rehearsed cruelty, taking care to leave a spectacle behind. It wasn't murder. It was desecration. Father's corpse represented a message, but what that message was, I couldn't say. Harriet had her own thoughts. "He's an omen, Jasper. Even I know that. You can't run from this. You can't hide from it, because we're tied to this land. Our blood belongs here." Tears pockmarked the page. Her writing became sloppy, haphazard, and hardly legible beneath the smudged ink. Father's words echoed in my mind. The last words he spoke to me. He told me that abandoning Gloomfall meant consequences far beyond our land, that the horrors our lighthouse kept at bay would begin to seep into the rest of the world, corrupting it, haunting it, eventually possessing it. You want the truth? The truth is that I'm afraid that whatever killed Dad is going to come back, and when it does, I'm not sure I can deal with it alone. I need you, Jasper. I've never asked you to come home, but I'm asking now, if only for a while. Think about it, would you? Hari. My eyes scanned the words. Once, twice, half a dozen times. Tears leaked down my cheeks and I wiped them away, crumpling the letter in my fist. 10 years, 10 long years. I'd been gone. adjusting to normal life, forgetting my nightmares, moving past my guilt, and finding a slice of happiness. And now this. Harriet was calling me back. "You've got to be kidding me," I seethed, pacing my bedroom. My mind raced for a reason to throw it in the trash, to forget I ever read it. I hated Gloomfall, the Lighthouse, the wood, but what I hated most of all was that Harriet was right. Father's death was an omen. I knew that better than anyone. Omens belonged to me. Father called them a gift, but if he'd seen them, he'd know they were a curse. I'd seen things, always. As a boy, I saw our chickens stricken with disease long before the illness ever came. I saw storms before we ever felt the rain. I saw creatures, awful and twisted, picking apart travelers through the phantom wood, feasting on their bones and drinking deep of their blood. I saw all of it the same way I'd seen my brother eat my mother, a week before her heart ever touched his lips. Tragedy. That was all the omens were. They told stories of grief and pain, and I thought if I left Gloomfall, then maybe I could save my family their torment. Salvage what remained. I hoped that deep down all of the terrible things we suffered were actually my fault, that I just took my omens and left. Then all of it would go away. "Idiot," I said to the mirror, shaking my head. Nothing but wishful thinking, was it? I knew then that my life wasn't the sort of bad dream I got to wake up from. I never would. The lighthouse was calling to me, pulling at my mind, begging me to return to it. So I did. Like a whirlwind, I swept my keys from the counter and flew down the apartment steps. I couldn't stop and think. If I did, I might do the smart thing and reconsider. I might turn back. I flung open my car door, got inside, and twisted the key in the engine. It rumbled to life. My foot hit the gas pedal. I backed out of the driveway, then I backed out of the city, my job, my happiness. I backed out of the only peace I'd ever known, and hit the open road, driving toward hell on earth. I drove 1,000 miles. Then I drove 1,000 more. I drove on until the road turned to gravel, to dirt, until it ended in the heart of a forgotten forest. Only then did I hit the brakes. A knot of trees rose before me, their limbs twisting and interweaving as if to create an archway. From the branches hung red-orange leaves, swaying weakly with the cold breath of autumn. I gazed into that tangle of wood, that ocean of darkness so pure that even my headlights couldn't pierce its surface. My fingers trembled as I opened the car door, my knees nearly buckling as I took my first steps onto that ancient land. My breath fogged in front of me. Even here, on the outskirts, I felt fearing seeping into me. It infested me like insects, scurrying across my mind. Such was the magic of the phantom wood. I pulled my jacket tighter about myself, stalking around my car to the dull crunch of leaves. My fingers found the cold metal of the trunk. I opened it. Inside was a lantern along with a bag of letters. I'd written them hastily. They described things I was looking forward to, things I cherished. My father taught me a long time ago that safe passage through the phantom wood didn't come freely. You had to prove you deserved it. You needed to light your way with your will to live. I lit a letter aflame, stuffing it inside the lantern housing. It crackled. The paper curled as black smoke swam upward, providing me a dim glow. It wasn't much. It was hardly enough to see my own 2 feet, but it'd have to do. My only hope was I'd written enough letters to last me the trip. Gloomfall was hours away. If I had more time, I would have written a surplus. But I didn't. Truth was, I had no time at all. Like I said, omens belong to me. I own them. The night before Harriet's letter arrived, I'd been visited by a new omen, a fresh one in the form of a dream. In it I saw a being, a vast creature with eyes of burning embers and long, crooked limbs. It sat perched above a body, a woman's. Her hair was the color of chestnuts, and her eyes were an ocean blue, but she had a head that was lying 6 feet from her corpse. A head that belonged to my sister. The wood was a blanket of darkness. Tall trees reached to the sky, their branches stealing the narrow shafts of moonlight. I navigated with my lantern alone. In it, I burned letters. I hoped I'd brought enough, but even now, a half hour into the journey, I felt my bag emptying faster than expected. Not good. My heart thrummed as I moved through the brush. There was a single path to Gloomfall, a narrow trail that was rarely traveled except by my family and those like us. It'd lead me to the lighthouse, to my sister, but only if I could find it. "Lost," said a voice. I wheeled about, raising the lantern and squinting into the murky shadows. "Who's there?" Laughter met my ears. Playful, a shape appeared, something bipedal and canine. A dog man. I drew back. pushing my lantern forward as if to prove a point. This grants me safe passage. You can't harm me. More laughter. The dogman dropped onto all fours. It was the size of a small bear, and as it neared, I saw its long teeth gleaming in the lantern glow. You've safe passage so long as you carry that. It'll run out before long. It lifted a human-like hand to its teeth, picking at them with a black claw. I can wait. Fucking hell. I didn't have any silver on me, which meant even if I could fight this thing, I couldn't kill it. I'd left before considering what I was walking into. Foolish. Stupid. Now I was paying the price. I squeezed the bag around my shoulder, crunching the letters beneath the fabric. There were fewer than I thought. You're going to be waiting a while, I lied, trudging on. The dogman didn't answer. Its padded feet moved through the brush behind me, softly passing over dead leaves as it sniffed at the air. Sniffed at me. My palms clammed up, and I readjusted my grip on the lantern. How far did I have to go? Too far. I still hadn't found the damn path. You're right to be afraid, said the dogman. That's so. I glanced over my shoulder, but I couldn't see it in the dim light. It was moving just beyond my vision, out there somewhere in the dark. Your old man was just the beginning, it said. Things are shifting here. Wheels are turning. You're a nameless haunt, I told it. What would you know? It snapped its jaws. I stumbled backward in surprise and nearly dropped my lantern. More laughter. And you're a fucking coward, it sneered. Nameless haunt or not, I'll have your heart in my teeth by the end of the hour. Bet on it. I took a deep breath, fishing in my bag for a fresh letter to light. Probably sooner than that, I thought anxiously. Where the hell is this path? Wait. A sound up ahead, just beyond the brush. Running water. I fumbled forward, doing my best to keep my tripping on any errant roots. I parted a clutch of branches, and ahead I saw a winding creek, the same one I'd walked along 10 years previous. If I followed that, then it'd lead back to my family's land and the safeguarding lighthouse that sat upon it. I smiled. My chances of survival just went from 0 to slim, and I considered that a welcome improvement. She's next, you know, the dogman said, rising up on its hind legs. It had to be 7 feet. It kept pace with me, its jaws salivating while its cold eyes buzzed with hungry anticipation. Without your old man, the girl's as good as dead. I grit my teeth, telling myself to ignore its taunts. It wanted a rise out of me. The more emotional I got, the sloppier I became, and the more likely I'd be to drop the lantern. You're well informed for a haunt, I said, doing my best to salvage something from my situation. Something as well connected as you probably knows what killed my old man. More laughter, howling. The dogman kicked up stones along the creek shore as it bounded around me, and I did my best to shield the lantern from any errant debris. If it knocked it out of my hand, even accidentally, the dogman would die. That was the law of the land. But I'd still be left without a lantern, and that meant other phantoms would have their fill of me before long. Something funny, I asked. I've just forgotten how long you've been gone. 8 years? 10? You never met him, did you? I frowned. Who? The dogman stepped in front of me, its eyes dangerous. The stick man, it whispered. He's on his way to Gloomfall now. He'll be killing your sister while we speak, doing all sorts of things to her. I searched his eyes, but I saw no hint of laughter behind them. No hint of a lie. He was telling the truth. Damn it. I bolted. My feet pounded over the stones of the dark shore. I rushed down the edge of the creek, wondering how long until I'd make it back onto our land, back to my sister. Too long, I thought hopelessly. She's as good as dead. Images played in my mind, images of a shadow with cinderlight eyes, crouched over Harriet, its long limbs playing over her corpse. I'd seen it in my dream, an omen. Faster, I've got to pick up the pace. I doubled my efforts, my lungs scorching like a furnace. The dogman ran casually at my side, his powerful legs kicking back stones as his teeth snapped near my ear. About time for another letter, don't you think? That one's almost out. What? I glanced down. The letter was still fresh. My world span. I tumbled, slipping on a wet stone. Stupid. I rolled in a shower of pebbles and came to a groaning stop, hating myself for being so gullible. I blinked, unable to see anything. The light. What happened to my light? My hand shot out. I searched desperately for my lantern, but the dark was suffocating. I couldn't see my fingers in front of my face. Looking for this? Said the dogman. I turned toward its voice. Please. Here you go. Something whistled through the air. I reached for it, fumbled it, and it crashed to the ground next to me. No, I gasped. I spread my hands across the stone shore, feeling for the lantern, and broken glass met my fingertips. Oh, said the dogman, but its voice had lost its teasing playfulness. It sounded hungry. Vicious. Looks like you've lost your safe passage. I grabbed the lantern. Broken or not, I could still use it so long as I protected the flame from the wind. I dug into my bag frantically, fishing out a letter, but before I could light it, a rough paw gripped my throat. I wheezed. It lifted me into the air, coughing and sputtering. My legs kicked out. They spasmed under me as I tried to beg for my life. Told you I'd have you between my teeth, the dogman snarled. It snapped his jaws near my ear. Question is, which end do I start with? Maybe the feet. Sometimes I like to listen to the screams for a bit. My mind reeled. I punched, clawed at the creature, but it was too big, too powerful. Clawless, I gagged. Less. Don't beg, the monster said. Desperation tastes pathetic. I fell. I fell to the stones, gasping for air. The dogman had dropped me. Why? A yelp sounded in the dark. My heart pounded. Letters. I needed to burn another letter. I reached for my bag. Another yelp. Was the dogman in pain? Being attacked? I couldn't worry about that. Right now, all that mattered was securing safe passage. I brought my lighter to the edge of a letter, and the paper curled, hissing and crackling with the sound of salvation. Good. I breathed a sigh of relief, placing it into the lantern housing and pinching it beneath a stone. That should buy me a few minutes. A new sound from my right. Slick. Wet. It was like flesh being torn into, carved up, and it was followed by a low canine whimper. I swallowed. The dogman wasn't a particularly powerful entity. It was considered a nameless haunt, a wandering phantom of the wood that did the bidding of other more terrifying creatures. But as nameless haunts went, dogmen were fierce beasts, and anything that could threaten a creature like that was wisely feared. Hello? I said uneasily to the dark. My lantern flickered, revealing a scene upon the rocky shore. Blood. It trickled over the stones, flowing past my boots and down into the babbling creek. I inched closer. A body lay on the ground, the dogman's. It wheezed, heaving weak breaths as something carved into its neck, working its way back and forth across the thick muscle with practiced efficiency. You're rusty, said a voice, cold and haunting. It belonged to a man. He stopped carving the creature's head, lifting the blade onto his broad shoulders where it gleamed serrated silver. I raised my lantern. My feet stumbled backward, my mouth moving wordlessly. The man was tall, far taller than I remembered. His hair fell around his neck in a black mane, and his lips spread into a midnight smile. At long last, he said, the prodigal son returns, and with him brings the end of all things. You, I breathed. It was all I could think to say. No words could express the hurricane of emotions, of rage, pain, and hatred I felt in that moment. I hadn't looked into those eyes since I'd watched them kill my mother 30 years ago. What's the matter? Asked the man. Don't you want to give your big brother a hug? You! I spat, body vibrating with rage. I lunged at Wesley, lunged at the bastard that took my mother from me, took our mother from us. He sidestepped me, slapping my back with the flat of the machete. Easy does it, little brother, he said, sneering. You haven't got time to be wasting on me, do you? He nodded toward my lantern and the flickering flame inside. I swallowed. The letter was almost out. I reached into my bag to grab another, but felt only a handful left. When? How? When you fell, Wesley said, as if reading my mind. Your letters spilled out everywhere. Most washed downstream. My heart sank. But then, almost as soon as it came, my disappointment was replaced with fury. Then, I'm dead anyway. I might as well take you with me. He lifted the machete, the silver of the blade glinting at my throat. I wouldn't, he said flatly. I don't want to hurt you, Jasper, and I mean that. I grit my teeth. You fucking killed her. You killed her and you ate her heart, you twisted, monstrous piece of shit. I told you then, and I'll tell you now. It was necessary. For you and for Harriet. For all of Gloomfall. He lowered his machete. I'm not buying it, I spat. What reason could possibly justify that? You tore our family apart. You killed Mom. It's not that simple. There are things you don't understand about Crows launched themselves from nearby trees, their caws echoing into the black ether. Something rumbled in the distance, something heavy, powerful. Wesley's face fell into a frown. "Why'd you have to say that word? You need to leave, Jasper. Now run, and keep running along the coast and don't stop." "How? I don't have enough letters," I said, gazing toward the now rising sound of approaching thunder. Whatever was out there was closing in. "Forget the letters," snapped Wesley. He jabbed his machete toward the water, toward the lighthouse, toward home. "Follow the river. I'll buy you what time I can." Questions passed my mind. Questions like how and why, but instead I nodded lamely. I might have had it Wesley. I might have wanted to kill him slowly someday myself, but the fact remained that my sister was in danger. She was the entire reason I'd come here. "Harriet, don't think this is finished," I growled, backing away. "I swear I'll be back for you, Wesley. I'll do what father should done 30 years ago." Wesley sighed, paying me a final, mournful look. "I know." He darted off. He dashed across the pebble beach, moving at almost inhuman speed toward the approaching rumbling. I made for the creek. I moved with more confidence now. I don't know if it was the fact I was overflowing with adrenaline, or if it was the fact that I had so few letters that I couldn't afford to make another misstep. I don't know. All I know is I clambered across the rocky shoreline like I was born for it. One step. Two. I lunged, scattering pebbles as my feet tore ahead. It was hard work. I had to keep my broken lantern covered with my hand, and the heat from the letters was burning my palm, but I knew the alternative was much worse. Getting caught out here without safe passage meant the haunts would have their way with me, and I'd seen plenty of what they like to do to their prey. I kept moving, breath coming in exhausted heaves. Somewhere behind me I heard the rumbling stop. I listened as the coming thunderclap evaporated, then ignited into an eruption. A roar met my ears. Something deafening, enough to rattle the bones beneath my skin, and I wondered in silent awe if Wesley was really confronting that thing. Why though? A question for later. Ahead of me rose a new challenge, an almost sheer ridge. I set my jaw. My options were to try and walk around it and lose time burning through my few remaining letters, or attempt to climb it. Doing that with the lantern in hand would be a difficult task, maybe an impossible one. Another roar. The creek rippled, the water shuddering from the force of whatever strange beast approached in the distance. Damn it. I didn't have the luxury of considering my options. I had to make a choice. The wall. It was the fastest way, assuming I could manage it. I lit a fresh letter, then put the handle of my lantern in my teeth, and got to climbing. It wasn't a particularly tall ridge, but it was steep. I'd need both hands for this. I gripped the rocky outcroppings, struggling to find purchase in the darkness. Slowly, I inched my way up. At halfway up the face, my teeth began to ache with the weight of the lantern. It banged against the front of the rock wall. The letter inside, flickering desperately as it tried to hold its flame. My heart fluttered. Come on, just a little further. I made it. I was up. I set the lantern down on the ledge, then pulled myself over. I took a brief moment to catch my breath, then lifted my light and carried on. This new area was familiar. Even in the dim glow, I recognized aspects of my surroundings, like an old elm tree or that overgrown fence running along the shoreline. I'd been here before, many times in the past. Where was it though? The beast roared again. This time the force was cataclysmic. Trees lurched. They bent forward, keeling beneath the might of the resultant shockwave. A blast of wind tore past me. Twigs and stones whipped about in the hurricane current, cutting into my arms, my face. I shut my eyes, grimacing in the face of gale. Then it dissipated. The wind faded, and once I heard the pebbles begin to scatter back to the ground, I opened my eyes. Darkness. I'd lost my light. No, I hissed. The force of the monster's roar had blown the letter away. I reached into my bag for another, desperately bringing my lighter to it, but something lunged at me from the direction of the overgrown fence. I fell, wrestling as it clawed at me, its skin peeling with every swipe. It smelled of rot, decay. Hungry, it groaned. So hungry. I grunted, trying to kick it off me, but like all haunts, its strength far outstripped its size. Jagged teeth tore into my shoulder. I cried out. The creature began chewing, ripping, and on instinct I grabbed the first thing I could, a stone from the shore, and bashed the monster across the head with it. It rolled off of me. I gasped, feeling warm blood leaking through my shirt. Not good. I reached into my bag for another letter to burn, but my bag wasn't there. It slipped off my shoulder when I fell. I dropped to my knees, feeling around the stones hastily. Where was it? I couldn't see a damn thing. More movement. It came from the trees. Slow. Shambling. From it came voices. A legion of them. Rasping. Hungry. Judging from the necrotic ache in my shoulder, I could guess these things were probably cold risen. A sort of resurrected dead. In this number, that meant I had to be close to the graveyard, and that meant I had to be close to home. I bolted. I abandoned the lantern, abandoned the bag of letters, and navigated using the sound of the creek alone. Trees shifted in the phantom wood beside me. Branches snapped. More haunts would be recognizing a traveler without safe passage. They'd be closing in, and they'd be doing it much faster than the cold risen could. Damn. Screeching, howling, groaning, cackling, all of it met my ears. A cornucopia of nightmares converging on me in the dark. Footsteps. Pause. An army of haunts pounded behind me, closing in. Faster. My lungs burned. My heart felt like it'd explode from the effort, but I knew I couldn't let up even a second. I was probably already dead as it was. At least they'll make you work for it, I grunted. I rounded a bend, and then I saw it, up ahead in the distance. A sweeping, ethereal glow. Gloomfall Lighthouse. Harriet, I shouted, tearing up the bank. Harriet, give me a hand, would you? I didn't even know if she was still alive. The cottage lights were dark. The land seemed silent, almost forgotten. I kept running, even as I heard the hiss and whispering of a dozen creatures gaining on me. Almost there. Something sharp caught my shoulder. A claw. I fell, rolling violently into the creek with a frigid splash. The next moment, I got a whiff of rancid breath, rough skin. 100 hands seemed to reach at me, desperate for their pound of flesh. Harriet. Light. It exploded across me. The desperate hands pulled back, retreating to an anguished chorus of screams and whimpers. I lifted an arm, shielding my eyes as I stumbled to my feet. Jasper? It was Harriet's voice. Distant. It sounded like she was shouting from atop the lighthouse, and I figured she probably was. The only thing capable of getting those haunts off of me was the full glare of Gloomfall's glow. Is that you down there? She called. I gave a thumbs up in her direction, smiling. Sure is good to hear your voice again, Hari. She was quiet. Harriet seemed cold in that moment, almost disappointed to see me. She'd begged me to return though, so why? There's somebody here you should meet, she said. Who? A half-beat of silence. Then another voice. This one soft, hazy, almost inaudible against the electric hum of the lighthouse's artificial sun. Me, it said. They call me the Stick Man, and I think you and I need to talk. The Stick Man. That was the entity the Dog Man had mentioned. The being, it said, had likely killed my father, and was going to kill Harriet. You! I shouted, splashing toward the lighthouse wildly. What are you doing here? I'm here for the same reason you are, it said. I'm here to kill your sister. I sloshed through the shallow river and up onto the shoreline, drenched and bruised. I felt emotionally exhausted, physically ruined. I felt like I'd reached the end of my rope, but I knew I wasn't finished yet. I was just getting started. Harriet, I shouted. Hold on, I'm coming. I stumbled forward, feet slapping the dirt in haphazard directions like a marionette dragged on strings. My mouth was parched. I needed to drink something, to eat something. I felt weak, my eyes strained in the glow of the lighthouse, the rotating beacon bathing me in an ethereal blue. Harriet, I shouted again, this time wheezing. A little closer, I stepped onto the grass, yellowed with the kiss of autumn. The winding brickwork of Gloomfall stood before me, rising into the black of the night sky, ivy draped across it. This place, it was just like it was in my memories, haunting, otherworldly. A rumble met my ears, a gentle thump-thump of footsteps racing down old wood stairs, and a moment later, the door of the lighthouse swung open. Candlelight spilled onto the courtyard. There, framed in the doorway, stood Harriet. She was fine, alive, healthy. Thank God, I muttered, suddenly feeling the full weight of my exhaustion. My chest still burned from my sprint. It came in heaves. I fell to the grass, my hands clutching at clumps of the dried mess. Why was my head spinning? Fainting. I was fainting. Harriet ran over to me, and I think she called my name. She looked like a picture-perfect memory, like everything else here, untouched by the grip of time. She wore blues jeans, a grubby red t-shirt, and her dark hair had been pulled back into a tight ponytail. "Jasper," she dropped to her knees in front of me, frantically checking my face for any wounds, looking over my body for any traces of heavy bleeding. "I thought you were dead." "Makes two of us," I said, my own voice distant. The world flickered. It dimmed. I was losing my grip on staying awake, staying conscious. I needed a break. Just a short rest would do. I made it Harriet. I came back. "I know," she said, and in the back of her voice was something else. A tone, something uncomfortable and disarming. Regret? Guilt? "I'm sorry, Jasper. I'm so sorry." "Sorry," I repeated, head spinning. A reply. I don't know what she said in response, couldn't quite make it out because the grass, harsh as it was, felt so nice against my cheek. The cold ground, a place to rest, a place to sleep. A smile crept across my face as my body entered its own involuntary shutdown sequence, and just before the light went out in my head, a thought struck me. If the stickman was here, then why hadn't he killed Harriet? Then, as if in answer, a tall shadow stretched over us, looming over Harriet's kneeling body like a crooked creature with two long limbs and an ill-fitting top hat. It had no face, no features. It tilted its head toward me, and a voice rang out in my mind. The last voice I heard before my world faded to black. "Finally, we can begin. You're up." Harriet stood over me, a warm rag in her hand. She pressed it to my forehead. "What happened?" I muttered, blinking. It looked like we were inside the family cottage, a stout wooden cabin that sat atop a hill beside the lighthouse. "The stickman is here," Harriet finished for me. "Always. Here." I shook my head, mind still trying to catch up to the situation. I glanced around. I couldn't see anything beside the softly crackling stove in the corner of the room, my old childhood bedroom. "Outside," she said, lips pulled into a tight frown, "standing watch." "For what?" "For her." Harriet spoke the words with an edge, a sort of bitterness I didn't remember her having. She looked stressed. Her blue eyes, normally bright, were dull and gray. "The decrepit one?" I asked, wondering if she was referring to the hag that roamed the Phantom Wood, who had long known she had ambitions for Gloomfall. She wanted to take the lighthouse for herself, though for what end, none of us knew. Harriet placed her hands on her hips. "Questions? Really? You've got about a dozen different toxins poisoning your bloodstream right now, Jasper. It's a wonder you're still alive. You need rest, not stress. I'm pretty sure I watched every last haunt in the Phantom Wood chase you onto the property. More than a few got a swing at you too." I winced. That explained the throbbing pain in my side, as well as the awful nightmares I'd had. "My letters of safe passage got blown away," I said sheepishly. "You don't say." She dabbed at a wound in my shoulder. Harriet had always been a prodigy when it came to medicine, to alchemy, to potions in general. I'd seen her nurse dad back from the brink of death more times than I could count. "Hari," I said softly. "About Dad." The corner of her mouth twitched. She dabbed the ointment more forcefully into my shoulder, and I clenched my jaw against the alcohol sting. "Let's not talk about Dad, okay? Not right now." I nodded. "Yeah, sure. Of course. Whatever you need." I'd never been close with our father, mostly owing to the fact that he blamed me for our mother's death. He always said I should. Shouted. Screamed. He said I should done anything to stop Jasper from killing Mom, from eating her. "The stick man," I said quickly, trying to push the memory from my mind. "He said he came here to kill you, that I did too. What did he—" "I don't know. I don't know a damn thing about anything anymore, Jasper, and it's making me scared and frustrated and angry," and her voice trailed off. It became a series of choking sobs, and Harriet turned her back to me, balling up her fists. She was never one for these kinds of displays. She had always been the stronger of the two of us, the more resilient. It's why she stayed behind in Gloomfall while I fled. She could handle things I couldn't, but whatever this was a bridge too far. "He showed up the night I sent that letter to you," Harriet said, one hand against the opposite wall, tears silently falling to the floorboards. "He appeared at the end of my bed, and I thought I was having another nightmare, a bout of sleep paralysis, but then he reached out and touched me. He ran a hand through my hair, told me he had been sent to kill me, but that he hoped he wouldn't need to." "What?" She turned, wiping her arm across her sniveling nose. Yeah, that was my response too. He told me that something was coming to Gloomfall and that it intended to break the magic of the lighthouse, crumble it to bricks. Something vile. My heart skipped a beat. Wesley, was the stickman talking about our brother? Harriet, I said quickly. On the way here, back in the wood, I saw Wesley, Harriet said before I could finish. I blinked at her, trying to catch up to the situation. How did you know that? She sighed, her fingers gripping the edge of the windowsill as more silent tears fell down her face. There's a lot you've missed in the years you've been gone. Too much. A strange anger flared within me. You knew about Wesley. I sat up, grimacing as pain lanced through my spine. What the hell is going on, Harriet? First Dad dies, then you're hanging out with the stickman, and now you're telling me you've been in contact with Wesley. He killed our mother, for God's sake. You don't think I know that? She snapped, meeting my eyes for the first time. You don't think I remember seeing him eat Mom's heart, hearing him chew it between his blood-stained teeth? You might have seen the whole thing, but I got to see the climax to that little nightmare. Don't you dare forget that. Harriet was seething. We both were. Children, came another voice. This one sleek as silk. It drifted from the window, and a moment later, a tall shadow craned its head into the room, its featureless face gazing at us beneath a flickering top hat. I sense an air of hostility in the room. I growled. You shouldn't be allowed to step foot on this land. You're a haunt. The lighthouse should burn you to ash. Ah, said the stickman, slinking into the room, twisting and contorting its long body through the window as Harriet stumbled backwards, face painted in various shades of disgust. The prodigal son, how good to see you've returned to us. I've been meaning to speak with you. Answer the question, I snarled. The stickman's voice hummed with the notes of amusement. My immunity to the lighthouse's charms is little different than yours, I suspect. I am a haunt, yes. Not all haunts are made of darkness. However, I manifest as a shadow, yes. But I am something more beyond my physical form, as we all are. The lighthouse can see this, even if your eyes cannot. You'll excuse me if I don't buy it, I said. You told me I'd kill my sister, and indeed you will. Or you will if I do not kill dear Harriet first. I reached toward the stickman, reached to throttle him, but my hands passed through him, and instead I fell onto the floor with a painful crash. Jasper? Harriet said, rushing to my side. Have you lost your mind? I said you needed to rest. I'm here because you told me to come, I shouted, my temper having completely divorced itself from my better sense. I nearly got myself killed in that fucking forest because you asked me to come home, and now I'm here, and you're treating me like a nuisance, and listening to this thing. The ground shook. Harriet rose to her feet, leaving me there wincing on the floor. I'm not listening to anybody. Did you even hear what I said to you? The whole of Gloomfall has lost its damn mind, and nothing makes sense anymore. The laws are breaking. Jasper, things aren't working as they're meant to. I've had to deal with that for the last month, while you've in tea. The ground shook once more, this time violently. The cottage groaned. A rush of wind tore through the window, rattling the shutters and extinguishing the candles. Darkness took us. Gooseflesh covered my skin. Harriet, I breathed. You okay? I'm fine, she said curtly, though there was an edge of terror in her voice. What is it? She asked, though not to me. It is her, said the stickman. Who? I hissed. You've crossed her path once already, he said. Out there in the bleak of the wood, she found you. Your brother came to your aid then, though I am certain he was unsuccessful in defeating her. Who is she? She is the storm that shatters, the scion of calamity that will untether the strings that bind this place, the beast in the dark. Look now, do you see it? I struggled to my feet, ignoring the pain rioting through my limbs. I felt blindly in the dark, finding the wall, then dragging myself up to lean against the window. The shutters slammed furiously. I squinted into the raging gale. Far away, sitting atop the rolling waves of the phantom wood, swirled a sea of clouds, pulsing with veins of red lightning. My jaw fell open. Harriet appeared at my side, and I could tell from her sharp gasp that this was new to her too. It's growing, she said, frightened. It's larger than before. Yes, replied the stickman, and it'll continue to grow, continue to feed until it swallows us all. How do we stop it? I croaked. I'm uncertain if you can, muttered the stickman. It would require the destruction of the creature that breathes life into that thunder. Your brother tried, and he failed. Wesley tried, I asked. Harriet's fist slammed against the wall. Enough with the cryptic bullshit. Just tell us who's behind the storm and we'll deal with it. This is what our family does. We kill monsters. Ah, said the stick man. And therein lies life's cruel poetry, for this monster is already quite dead. As a matter of fact, you buried it yourselves. He lifted a long arm, pointing a hooked finger out toward a stone rising from the yellowed grass outside. It stood in the shadow of the lighthouse, lit up in flashes of far-off lightning. No, Harriet said, stumbling backward. I couldn't see her face in the dark, couldn't see her expression, but I could hear the pain in her words. You're lying. How could you lie about that? Something you both should know, said the stick man, lifting a leg through the open window, is that I never lie. He stepped over the sill with the other, the rolling shutters passing through him as though he weren't even there. He tipped his top hat. The beast in the dark is a creature you're well familiar with, for she was the one who gave birth to you. Mom, I muttered, gazing at the gravestone in terror. I'm afraid so, child, and you'll be sorry to hear she wants nothing more than for both of you to join her in the dirt. Why? Roared Harriet, rushing to the window. Why would our mother want that? She was kind, caring. She loved us. The stickman considered Harriet, his scarecrow frame lit up in the sweep of the lighthouse's glow. Memories are fickle things, aren't they? And with that, he turned and sprinted into the dark of the phantom wood toward the rolling storm. The thing in the woods. I've been dying to tell this story, though I know no one is bound to believe me. I don't even want to tell my parents in fear that they'll stare at me in disbelief and think that I'm crazy. So here I am, anonymously telling it to a group of strangers in hopes that someone will believe me and give me some peace of mind. It started out a few months ago when we moved into our new home. I grew up in a rural community, but there were plenty of neighbors and mostly fields around, no woods. Given that I am the youngest child, my parent waited until I was done with high school to move, as to not affect my already established life. Although we had always lived in a small rural community, my parents were ready for something a little more secluded, something with a lot of acreage, woods, and a place to shoot. They put my childhood home up on the market and soon found their dream home, which is where I am currently and desperately writing this story. The house and the property are beautiful. It's a large turn-of-the-century house facing 15 acres of land, the majority of which are woods and a nice half-acre pond. The best part, or so I thought, is that there are no neighbors within a mile of us. At first, I really enjoyed it. Being out in the woods was very much a cathartic experience for me. It helped shed the stresses of school and studying. Being among the tall trees and the surrounding nature made all of my problems seem totally insignificant, so I made a habit of going on regular walks through the woods. As the weeks went on, I started noticing strange things as I went on my walks. I would find partially eaten deer scattered along the leaf-littered ground, accompanied by a putrid, rotting smell, which I attributed to the carcass in front of me. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was probably coyotes, I would tell myself. Other than that, I thought nothing of it, but started carrying a gun with me on my walks in case I encountered the animal that was responsible for the carnage I saw in front of me. As the days went on, I started noticing more and more mutilated deer scattered across the floor of the woods, still accompanied by the rotting smell, which I again attributed to the animals. If the increasing number of mutilations weren't enough, I started to notice a change in the sounds coming out of the woods. What was once a cacophony of sounds was now mostly dead silence, minus the low guttural growl that seemed to be becoming more prevalent, more pronounced, and more insidious each day. By this point, I had stopped going on my little walks. Gun or no gun, I didn't want to risk the chances of facing whatever was causing these events. That being said, my curiosity eventually got the best of me one night, as I heard its growls. I decided that I was going to go get a trail cam and set it up out in the woods the following day, in hopes of finally seeing what was out there. The next evening after work, I gathered up what little courage I had left, and camera in hand went walking out into the very woods I had promised myself I would stay out of. I never did get to set up the trail cam. I lost it somewhere in the woods while it was in a panic, running for my life. I made it about 100 yards past the tree lines into the woods, where I decided to stop and set up the camera. I thought it was a good place to set it up, and quite frankly, I was too scared to go any further. After all, I wanted to spend as little time out there as possible given the ongoing events, and the fact that it would be dark soon didn't help. Already on edge, every creak of the wood and every crunch in the leaves sent me into a panic. Rushing to set the camera up, I drop it, sending it to the leaf-ridden ground with a thud. Murmuring under my breath, cursing myself for being out there, I bent down to pick the camera up when I started to smell that putrid smell of rotting flesh again. I carefully looked around, checking my surroundings to see if anything was out there. I could feel something watching me, but I couldn't see anything. Just as I was finishing picking my supplies off of the ground, I heard that low guttural growl again, as well as the snap of a branch to my right. I quickly turned, seeing a human-like creature standing there, staring at me. I was completely frozen with fear. It had human features, standing on two legs, and it had feet and hands. The two things that threw me off, however, was the fact that its skin was charred black, as if it had been burnt in a fire, and most disturbingly, it had no upper or lower lips. Although mostly bald, a few thin straggling hairs stuck every which way out of its scalp. Its sharp teeth were hanging out like hypodermic needles. With the absence of lips, its raw, red gums hung out in the open. Thick strings of what appeared to be saliva dripped off of its chin in a persistent stream. For one single brief moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I quickly went through options on what to do. There were really only two viable options: either stay exactly how I was, and get attacked, and most likely killed by this thing, or I could get the fuck out of there. I chose the latter. I quickly scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as I could, throwing my camera in vain at the creature behind me. In the chaos of what had just occurred, I found myself to be momentarily lost after running in what I thought was the right direction for what felt like 20 minutes, but I'm sure was only 30 seconds. Looking around and not seeing the spawn of hell that I had just encountered, I stopped to collect myself and try to find the way back to the house. I finally decided on the general direction in which I should head, when I heard a commotion that almost sounded like a horse pounding its hooves on the dirt. I looked behind me and saw that thing, whatever it was, running at me on all fours, mucus-like spit flying out of the corners of its mouth, like a rabid dog. I ran as quickly as I possibly could without daring to look behind me. Although I would not look at it, I could hear it galloping behind me and smell its rotted flesh. Tears ran down my eyes, as I thought that there was no way possible to make it out of the woods alive, when I finally saw the lights of my house out of the clearing. Using what little adrenaline I had left to sprint the 200 yards or so to my back porch, I quickly opened the door and slammed it shut, not daring to look out the window. It's been about a month now since that happened. I haven't told anyone, and I will not dare to go back out in those woods. I've been doing a lot of research to see if I could find any clues as to what that thing might have been. I've exhausted myself, but I think I may have come to a conclusion. The closest thing I could find was possibly a skinwalker. I know my sighting doesn't entirely match up with the stories I've heard, but it's the closest thing I found. Any suggestions on what it might be would be greatly appreciated. I've seen some weird stuff in the woods. Here's the truth. This gear is nothing without me. My legs, my mind, my talent. That's what makes the magic happen. Sorry to everyone who bought the same shoes thinking they'd run like me. They won't. #Kip, and only Kip #Whoa. Hose, are the future #Kip, runs fast. I posted this with a perfectly curated flat lay of my gear, a trophy positioned in the corner for motivation, and my lucky blue Brooks hat front and center. I hit share, exited the app, and waited for the notifications to start chirping. I knew they would. I've been trail running's poster child for years, living proof that grit and glory don't always come without a side of ego. You know the type. Those of us, and sometimes the ladies, let's not be judgmental, who act like ultra trail running isn't just a lifestyle but a higher calling. Not everyone can handle it, and let's be honest, it takes a special kind of person to spend hours alone on trails, conquering terrain that would break most people in minutes. While others waste their weekends binge-watching TV, we're out grinding through miles of wilderness, proving we're tougher, faster, and more resilient than 99% of the population. This isn't just about running. It's about domination. It's about people like me, people who refuse to settle for mediocrity and need the world to know it. And what better way to let the world know than to post about it? So I did, daily. Actually, multiple times a day. My feed was a mix of clothes, supplements, and medals. I stood tall and proud in the center of every photo, smiling wide, surrounded by my so-called minions. There were ambassador-branded salutes, a couple of posts supporting efforts to bring a missing female runner home, and plenty of coffee cheers sprinkled in for good measure. My feed was a science, and I had it perfected. I was training for a 100-mile trail race, the Madman 100. As egotistical, politically narrow-minded, and attention-seeking as some might say I am, people started to take notice when I posted about it. The Wahoos, a local run club, jumped into my comments, showering me with likes and invites to podcasts. My fan base on Insta and Strava started to soar. Training for an ultra is grueling, but I was thriving. By February, I had my routine locked in. Winter landscapes made for even better pictures. Running in shorts in sub-zero weather. That's the kind of grit that gets you reshared. One morning after snapping a quick selfie, breath fogging the air, beard already dripping with icicles, I set off on a trail I'd run hundreds of times. The trailhead sign was littered with flyers, upcoming events, missing people notices, and hunting guide advertisements. I didn't bother reading them. Why would I? I knew the race is coming up, and they made for lousy selfie backdrops anyway. That morning felt like any other, until I saw her. In the distance, through the trees, a woman moved with an impossibly fluid gait, like she was floating over the uneven terrain. Other runners frequent these woods, but there was something about her, the way she seemed to vanish just as I thought I'd catch up. Her tracks were light and small, like a deer's. Her ponytail bobbed like a rabbit's tail, always disappearing just out of reach. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop looking for her. Every few days, I'd catch a glimpse of this phantom runner, her pink hat bouncing through the brush. Each time she stayed just beyond my grasp. I never saw her car in the lot, so she must have been using another access point. I started parking at different trailheads, running at odd hours, burning through PTO just to find her. Ultra running can be an obsession, and for me it, or she, became all-consuming. The lack of sleep and relentless miles took their toll. My time slowed. My body ached, shins, splints, blisters, frostbite. My beard grew shaggy, streaked with gray, and my eyes, wild, desperate, stared back at me in the rearview mirror. Madman 100 was less than a month away, and it was time to taper my training, less time on the trails, unless I wanted to die trying. Then, in early March, I saw her again. This time she was closer, her form more defined. She stopped, waved, and disappeared into the trees. My heart pounded as I slammed my truck into park, leaving the keys inside. I knew these trails like the back of my hand. I sprinted to cut her off at the bridge. The mist clung to the forest, muffling my footsteps as I closed the distance. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. Light in a forest can be uncanny, shifting and unnatural. As I moved, I noticed a creeping darkness on the trail. The bare limbs of the trees seemed to reach out toward me. High above, large black birds perched, watching my every step. At the cutoff, I finally closed in. Just ahead, on the bridge, was my trophy, the runner. Her whole figure was visible now, moving swiftly, her feet barely touching the ground. But as I approached, her form shifted unnaturally, bending and blurring like something out of a nightmare. Her pace wasn't a run or a walk, but a strange erratic rhythm that both drew me in and filled me with dread. Suddenly she flickered, like a poor TV signal, and then she was gone. When I reached the spot where she'd been, the truth hit me like a blow. She wasn't alive. She wasn't even human anymore. What I saw was a decayed corpse, grotesquely entangled in the gnarled branches of an ancient oak. Her bright clothing was dulled by moss and dirt, the pink hat still clinging to her skull. She'd been there a long time, swallowed by the wilderness, forgotten. The only movement was the gentle swaying of her hair in the cold breeze. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. The woods were silent except for the pounding of my heart and the groaning of the trees in the wind. I turned and bolted toward my truck, my mind racing. Had this woman, this runner, ever really been there? Who had I been chasing all this time? I couldn't shake these thoughts as I tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Moving swiftly, I began to repeat the same words over and over in my head. Kip runs fast. Kip runs fast. But now the trails felt darker. The paths were overgrown, unfamiliar. Trees I didn't remember blocked my way. Mile markers were distorted, the numbers no longer logical. The woods stretched on forever. More than once I turned a corner and saw her again. Her sun-bleached hair still caught in the branches of that ancient tree. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. All I could hear was the cawing of the crows watching from above. I pressed on as night fell around me. Those who followed me saw the final post, a picture of me, huddled in a clearing of brambles, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The caption read, "I've been running forever. No end. She's still here. I'm still here." My childhood dog ran into the woods. When he returned, there was something very wrong with him. I vividly remember the day Duke disappeared. My family was spending the day at the lake next to our little bungalow at a quaint property in northern Ontario. All four of us were swimming and splashing around in the warm lake water, attempting to quell the blistering August heat. Our only neighbor for miles, an old retired police officer named Benny, was smoking on his patio. I waved to him, and he waved back. We were in the dog days of summer, and I was glad to be in the water. Duke loved the water as much as I did, and was still very energetic, being a large, middle-aged mutt. We would often throw frisbees and sticks off the dock, where he would take flying leaps into the blue-green lake. That's exactly what we were doing when he vanished. As I was drawing back my hand to throw the frisbee for Duke, who was anticipating a throw and getting ready to run, he suddenly whipped his head to the woods. I too looked back at the rows of towering hardwoods and conifers, scanning them to see what Duke was looking at. It was nothing, at least to me. What followed was a blur. Duke suddenly bolted for the trees, barking and snarling all while we were screaming his name. I screamed at my parents to get out of the water and help me chase him. I even saw Benny spring out of his rocking chair to help us. I ran as fast as my 9-year-old legs could carry me into the dense forest, twigs and debris snapping under my feet. But you can only get so far in flip-flops before you trip. I tumbled to the ground screaming and crying after accidentally scraping my leg against a sharp rock. My mom consoled me while I caught a glimpse of my dad running through the woods. It was a while before my dad and Benny came back. My dad had a somber look on his face. He didn't have to tell us what we already knew, but Benny looked shaken. "I'm sorry folks, but he ain't coming back," he said shakily. He took off his faded baseball cap respectfully and patted me on the shoulder before trudging up the hill back to his house. My whole family missed him, but to me it felt like a part of me left when Duke did. He had been my best friend since I was a young, and I even had a small photo album packed with pictures of the two of us. For a while, every night before bed I would sift through the laminated pages of the photo album, reminiscing about good times and praying that someday he would come back to us. Deep down I knew he wouldn't. A few months after Duke disappeared, my dad arrived home from work with a surprise. It was another dog. It wasn't elegant and athletic like Duke was. It was one of those tiny white yappy ones with crusty red goop around its eyes. My parents fell in love with it, Princess, they called her. But I didn't. I simply referred to her as the dog. I was bitter, so bitter because I'd interpreted my dad's gesture of kindness as his own confirmation of Duke's absence. In time I did grow to tolerate her. I had to admit she was good company, and it was cute when she curled up by my feet. Life was going normally for us until Duke came back. It had almost been a year since Duke had disappeared. On this particular day we were all cooped up inside, courtesy of the rain. I was engulfed in my book when suddenly I heard a bark. Not a high-pitched yap, but a deep booming bark. I put down my book and rushed to the back door where I'd heard it, Princess scuttling at my heels. When I peeked through the window I nearly fell over. It was Duke. Somehow. By this time my parents had arrived. My mom rushed past me and whirled the door open, while my dad and I hung back, mouths agape. As my mom hugged Duke, I couldn't help but notice something off. I'd spent countless hours spending time with him and sleepless nights poring over photo albums. I'd familiarized myself with every spot, marking and quirk of Duke's fur. One of his most striking features was a black spot over his left eye which had appeared in almost every one of the photos. But standing here was Duke. His eye spot was now on his right eye. As a matter of fact, his whole pelt seemed to have been flipped. He was missing his collar and he was skinnier than we'd last seen him, but it was him all right. Well, that's what I thought. The first red flag was how Princess reacted to Duke. She was a yappy dog all right, but when she saw Duke she went ballistic, spitting and yapping like we'd never seen before. Princess barks at everything, remember? My dad told me, sensing my discomfort, she's probably just barking because he smells like the forest. And with that, he went outside to greet Duke. The barking must have alerted Benny, and he went outside to see what the commotion was. Once he saw what was going on, he darted back into his house and audibly slammed the door. When my parents came back inside, I tentatively stuck out a hand for Duke to sniff. He didn't wag his tail like I expected him to. All he did was quietly sit down. Then he heard Princess yapping from the other side of the room. His head swiveled, and he lifted himself and padded confidently towards her. Before long, he had her cornered. All he was doing was standing and watching her. yet Princess' eyes were bulging as she howled and yapped. A sense of dread was beginning to creep up my spine. But before anything happened, my dad whistled, and Duke lifted his head. With one last glance at Princess, he slunk away. The sense of wrongness didn't alleviate for the rest of the time Duke was with us. The second red flag was that Duke didn't eat the food we put out for him. Granted, it was food intended for small dogs, but it was still the same formula. Dogs are wired to eat everything they can get their paws on anyways, so even then it wouldn't have mattered. Not once did I see him eat. Every time we let him outside in the woods to relieve himself, he came back 20 minutes later, his white muzzle stained pink. I found it odd that my parents didn't think he was at risk of running away again, but since he didn't run, I never brought it up. They spent all their time with Duke, petting him, coddling him, attempting to feed him, and playing with him. All this while completely ignoring Princess as well as my objections. Something's different about him, I'd brought up during dinner one day. That's nonsense. What are you talking about? Said my dad. He's good old Duke. He looked at the dog as if searching for approval. We ate the rest of dinner in silence. As the summer went on, Duke seemed to gain more and more influence over my family. At this point, it was just me taking care of Princess. It was up to me to feed, walk, and take care of her now, as my parents had completely neglected her. This dog wasn't the Duke I used to know. Every time he walked into the same room that Princess was in, she would scuttle away in fear and into my arms. I took to always being in the same room as Princess, just as a precaution. From what? I didn't want to admit, but deep down I think I knew. One day Benny approached me while I was walking Princess. "You doing okay, kid?" Yeah, it's... I trailed off. Benny bent down to meet my height. His friendly blue eyes clouded with concern. "Be careful, kid. If you need any help, I'm right up here." Without another word, he turned and walked back into his house. When I came back from the walk, my mom announced that we were going to the store. Dad had figured out that Duke liked raw meat, and we had run out of it. As a matter of fact, we had run out of all other food in the house. But of course, in order to enter the grocery store, we needed to leave the dogs alone. I wanted to stay home and look after Princess, but my mom wasn't having it. "I don't know why you always insist on being around that dog," said my mom. "It's not healthy." "Look who's talking," I muttered. "We're going to buy a bunch of raw meat for a dumb dog." For that, she slapped me. Tears sprung from my eyes. "Don't you dare speak about Duke that way," she huffed. "Get in the car." Without another word, I did as she said and got in, leaving Princess behind with the dog. I couldn't stop thinking about Princess as my parents cleared out the raw meat section. The drive home was nerve-wracking, and the walk up the driveway to our cottage was dreadful. I could hear the whimpering even before the door was open. Hard in my throat, I whirled the door open and screamed. Princess was under the kitchen table, leg bleeding profusely. No, it was gone. One of her legs was just gone. Curled up on the carpet was Duke, muzzle stained red. The rest of my family walked in. "Oh, the mess you've made. Bad dog," my mom said as she scolded Princess. She gave a pathetic whimper in response. This was my breaking point. "Stop," I wailed. "Are you guys blind? He tried to kill her. She needs to go to the vet." Yeah. "Duke, I have a snack for you." His ears shot up as my dad ripped open a package of ground beef. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten all day, and the only food we'd bought was meat for Duke. I was livid. This damn dog was taking them over. I didn't feel safe anymore. "I'm leaving," I announced. "I'm taking Princess with me." Tears were streaming down my face. Even as no one acknowledged me, I packed a few belongings and grabbed a towel to wrap Princess in. I remembered what Benny had said to me earlier that day, and I knew what I had to do. As I trudged down the dirt trail to Benny's house, thoughts collided into each other in my mind. Why were my parents ignoring me so much? Why didn't they care about Princess? Did they even love me anymore? The last one made me cry even harder. I reached the faded red door of Benny's house and knocked. He appeared a moment later, and when he saw me holding Princess with tears streaming down my face, his breath hitched. "I knew this would happen," he muttered gravely under his breath. "Get in my truck, kid. Well, go get your dog some help." He unlocked his truck, and without another word, and I climbed silently into the back seat. I watched the cloud-dotted sky turn into pale shades of pink and purple as we sped down the bumpy road. After a while, we arrived at a small house which seemed to have been converted into a veterinarian clinic. Benny took Princess in his arms and rushed in, yelling for help. I followed along slowly and sat down in the waiting room, sad and defeated but too tired to cry even more. After a lot of frantic pleading, Princess was to receive emergency care. A woman in a teal veterinarian's uniform carried her away. I sprung out of my seat. "Let me go with her," I begged. Benny guided me away. "She's gonna get help now, kid. It's in God's hands now." I plopped back down and curled into a ball. Benny patted me on the back. A somber silence had appeared between us when I broke it by asking Benny something that I hadn't gotten a chance to before. "Benny, what did you mean when you said that you knew this would happen?" He tensed up. A guarded look crossed his face, then one of guilt. He exhaled a melancholy sigh. "Well, you see, kid, you know why I live alone?" he asked. I shook my head. "Well, I had family too once. Marjorie, and my son, James." A sad look crossed his face. "You remind me of him. We had a dog too, a beautiful pointer, named Max. James loved him, so he was all torn up when he went run away. But one day, about a year later, we find him standing at the front door. Something's wrong in those woods. It changed Max. He wouldn't eat the dog food we got him, only raw meat. James was happy to see him, but Marge was happier. I found it strange, because the night I'd brought Max home from the pound, she yelled at me like she never had before." Benny chuckled wistfully to himself. "Well, since I was busy patrolling all day and night, I didn't notice it as much as I should. James kept missing school, and I noticed he was thinner. I told Marge that she had to take care of her son, but all she did all day was spend time with the dog. I tried to do the best I could, but I was a terrible dad and a terrible husband. I should have helped my wife. I should have protected James." He exhaled. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, not knowing what else to say. Benny shook his head. "I ain't finished yet. You see, one day, me and my partner get a call. Some neighbors had called about a disturbance at my address. My partner was in the driver's seat, and I was the first one to get out of the car. When I walked in the house, I saw my boy in the middle of the kitchen, dead. The dog was eating him. Instinctively, I shot the dog. That's when Marge turned around with a knife. She lunged at me and I shot the fatal blow. All 3 members of my family dead in one night." My mouth was wide, and the full weight of his words weighed heavy on me. Was that to be the future of my family? "Benny, that's terrible. I'm so sorry." I looked up at him to see a single tear trickling down on his otherwise stony expression. "I failed James as a father. I can't do the same with you, kiddo." After his story was finished, I felt my eyelids start to droop. I leaned on Benny's arm. "Good night, Benny." He was staring straight ahead, face emotionless. "Tonight." When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was how much my back hurt from sleeping on a chair all night, but I wasn't cold. Benny had put his tattered flannel jacket over me as a blanket. I sprung up from my chair and yelped at the receptionist. "Where's Benny?" She jumped in shock. "He went to go do some errands," he said. She got up from her chair and picked up a few items. "Take this, dearie, you must be starving." She placed a buttered bagel, a blueberry muffin, a banana, and a bottle of apple juice on the table next to me. She was right. I was starving. Food always tastes the best after you've been deprived of it. I ran my fingers over my ribs. I could feel each one protruding from my chest. This was the first time I'd been full in ages. The receptionist had informed me that Princess had made it and that she was in the recovery stage. When I saw her for the first time, my heart exploded out of love for Princess and I hugged her gently. I smiled as she licked my face. I didn't know where else to go, so I played Scrabble with the receptionist for the rest of the day. I got to meet a fat cat named Mr. Cuddles, a rabbit named Twix, and I got to eat a hamburger for lunch. But all throughout the day, I kept wondering, when would Benny be back? At 3:04 p.m., my question was answered as Benny stumbled through the door. There was blood on his clothes. A couple of police cars were waiting outside. "Let's get going, kid." Although I didn't get the full story immediately, I came to know the full extent of what had happened eventually. Even though he wasn't part of the police force anymore, Benny still had connections with the department and to the people that know what happened to his family. He gathered police officers and went to my house where they found Duke eating the carcasses of my parents. Benny shot him dead. I wept profusely for my parents, not for how they were to me in their final weeks, but for the people they once were. Benny assured me that they had loved me. There were not many people at the funeral, mostly townsfolk. Seeing as I didn't have any other relatives, the courts placed me in the custody of Benny after a lengthy court process. A few years later, he officially adopted me. Princess came to live with us too. Benny was proud of me when I went off to police college, when I got married, when my wife and I had a child. As per his wishes, we held him a small funeral. Life is generally good to me. I have a wonderful wife and an amazing daughter. Sometimes on the bad days in the dead of night, I thrash in my sleep as visions of dead dogs and screaming people writhe in my nightmares. But when I wake, I look at my daughter sleeping in her cradle and my wife hugs me back to sleep. I remember that everything is okay now. I took a wildlife tracking class. If you ever see these types of tracks in the woods, run. I wish I'd taken a photo, wish that I'd drawn what it looked like at the time, but I was too ashamed to tell this story until now, because what happened is partly my fault. I wasn't completely proficient back then. I'm a sign language interpreter, and at the time I'd just graduated. Maybe if I'd been better at my job. I saw the gig for the animal tracking and wilderness exploration class and thought it sounded like a fun experience for a newbie like me, and I really needed the work, so I accepted the job, arrived half an hour early. I was pretty nervous back then. Anytime meeting a new deaf person was nerve-wracking because what if I couldn't understand them? What if we didn't jibe? What if they were one of those really fast signers who just have no patience for beginners? And so I went early hoping I could glean some context for the job and learn her preferred signs for the vocabulary related to the trails. But it was rocky from the get-go. The moment I stepped out of my beat-up Honda and started to introduce myself, she signed, "You're late. You were supposed to be here half an hour ago." "Oh, I am sorry. Maybe the agency gave me the wrong time," I stammered, my hands fumbling. Of all the days for me to get it wrong, I was already so nervous. I said, "You must be Lai. Lai." Her name was Leilani, but in the moment I forgot how to spell it. She quickly corrected me, her fingers so fast I didn't catch more than the L. But then she gave me her name sign, her hand in L shape, and brushed the tip of her thumb against her cheek in a repeat motion. It was an easy one, thank goodness. Then rolling her eyes, she opened her mouth and spoke aloud in deaf accented English. "Okay, well the interpreter is here now, so I guess we can get started, everyone." Trying not to hide how relieved I was that she voiced for herself, I fell into step with her students. There were only 3, a father and son, and a middle-aged woman. "Is this all?" I asked, looking around in surprise. The guide shrugged. "It's so cold this morning, a lot of people probably decided to stay in their warm beds." Then she spoke aloud to the trio. "The fresh snow is great for seeing tracks." The man and his son were named Damien and Dee. Dee was 9, very excited, and claimed to see a deer in the trees every few minutes. Damien was a laid-back parent who made constant dad jokes. It was apparent he'd mostly brought his son here because of the boy's love of animals. Our last member, Chantal, was a gray-haired woman covered in healing gemstone bracelets who told us she enjoyed foraging for herbs and mushrooms. The freshly fallen snow had formed a crunchy, icy crust on the surface of the world, and it crunched pleasantly under our boots as we set off on the wintry trail. The sun's rays glistened off the surface of the snow like diamonds. Since the guide didn't need me to voice, my job was relaxingly easy. I signed whenever one of the 3 hearing people interjected a comment or question, or in Damien's case, a silly dad joke. 20 minutes passed on the trail, and then we took a pause so that Dee could wander off into the bushes, because predictably, the little boy needed to pee. While we waited, our guide turned keen eyes to me. She was a spry woman with crow's feet and just a hint of gray in her hair. "Nice to be an interpreter, huh?" she signed. "I bet you get to go do all sorts of interesting gigs." "This is definitely the coolest," I replied, and I meant it. I told her I mostly interpreted college classes teamed with a more seasoned interpreter because I was still new. Her smirk said, "Yeah, I can tell," but she was gentler now that we were on the trail, and remarked, "Worth coming out on a frigid Saturday morning." "Saturday? You mean Friday?" "No, Saturday. Definitely Friday." I checked my calendar and showed her. "Oh dang, I get so mixed up sometimes." She laughed, and the tension broke between us. Then she looked worried. "Maybe you were early instead of late." "I hope I don't have other students waiting for me back at the parking lot." "Oh God, what if I got the time wrong?" For a second her expression clouded over, but then, like the sun piercing the clouds, she grinned as she noticed something in the bushes. "Hey, raspberries!" I saw only thorny sticks bowed over into the snow. Our guide chuckled and explained, voicing aloud for the others, that raspberries are pretty easy to identify. These canes grow tall and then loop down to the ground like this. The laterals, that's these side branches, produce the berries. You can recognize them by the leaves, always in a trio. She fingered a few remaining dead leaves. Raspberries, huh? Said Damien, as Dee returned from his pee break to examine the thorny shrubbery. Hey Dee, know how you can tell a raspberry bush? The leaves? He said, echoing our guide. That's her way, but I'll let you in on a secret, easier way. Damien bent down and whispered loudly in his son's ear. Just look for the red berries. Then you know raspberry bush. We all just chuckled at Damien's usual dadness, while Dee protested loudly that there are no berries in winter. But everyone forgot the berries when our guide pointed out animal prints up ahead in the snow. Our first tracks. The 2 oval indents were deer hoof prints marching through the snow across our path and into the trees. Dee immediately wanted to follow, but our guide convinced him we should stick to the trail. Soon we identified rabbit and squirrel tracks, as well as some bird prints. But then, just as we reached a dip in the trail leading to a narrow stream, our guide frowned at a set of very large prints. They came from the trail beyond and vanished into the stream in front of us, and looked almost like human feet, almost, but with longer toes. It was difficult for her to get a clear sense of the prints, she told us, because whatever creature made them was shuffling along through the snow, making the prints blurred and elongated. Ooh, a mystery. Damien nudged Dee. Let's follow them, squealed Dee. Is it safe? It's not a bear, is it? Wondered Chantal. No, not a bear. Definitely not, the guide assured us. She eyed the tracks again, frowning. They came down the very trail we'd be taking if we crossed the stream. But because the tracks went into the stream, presumably coming out somewhere else, if we followed them, we'd be heading in the direction the animal came from, not the direction it was going to, meaning we were unlikely to run into it. Anyway, there weren't any large dangerous animals in these woods, according to our guide. After pondering for a moment, she declared we could finish the trail loop. Once we crested the hill, it would curve around across a meadow and take us back to the parking lot. What if they're human tracks? Chantal said. Last year a hiker went missing here. What if it's them? Our guide looked skeptical. Are you sure you aren't thinking of a different park? I've worked here for years and never heard of anyone going missing except one hiker who got found a day or two later. It was definitely here, insists Chantal. I remember because I avoided coming here for months because of it, even though I live pretty close by. The story just scared me. A hiker wouldn't be wandering out here a full year, especially barefoot. There have been dozens of people on this trail since. The guide shrugged. Dee was already up ahead of us, forging across the stream and then dashing through the snow. The tracks lead up here, he shouted. Hey Dee, don't run so far, Damien hollered. We all hurried to catch up. Dee had stopped at the crest of the hill and stood there, small in the bright sun, staring at something. As we all caught up, panting and out of breath, we looked to see what had captivated his attention. Here at the hill's crest, the trail forked. In one direction, it descended across a wide field, slowly looping back towards the woods and stream and presumably the parking lot where we'd started. In the other direction, the tracks followed the trail through dense trees and into a cleft in a rocky cliff face, vanishing into darkness. Which way do we go? Asked Chantal, turning to look along the sunnier trail. But Dee kept pointing to the tracks in the cave and saying, Please, let's follow the tracks. Please, can we see what's there? I don't know, buddy, said Damien. You sure you want to go into a spooky dark cave? Yes. The guide, meanwhile, pursed her lips. She caught my eye and signed. They could be human tracks. If they are, they're barefoot, and the way they're dragging their feet in the snow, they need help. If there's any camping material in that cave, maybe it's someone who got stuck out here. But her eyes narrowed on the cliff wall. She motioned me to join her, and we followed the footprints through the trees. Dee immediately tailed us, which meant so did everyone else. As we approached the split in the rock face, the guide paused and signed to me. I'm gonna see what's in there. The thing is, I've hiked these trails for years. I don't remember there being a fork like this. It's strange. This shouldn't be here. I need to check and see what's going on. Stay with the group. I'll let you know if it's safe and just ends up being an empty cave or something. Are you sure you don't want me to? Stay, she signed. Then she turned and called aloud to the other three. Stay here. I'm going to go check and make sure it's safe. The wait for our guide's return seemed forever. We had left the sun behind and stood in the shade of that rocky cliff. The temperature felt as if it had plummeted 20 degrees. And not just a chill on my skin, but The cold seemed to have injected into my very veins, an ice pick of terror that increased with every passing moment. My heart rate escalated. Suddenly I thought maybe I understood what people meant when they talked about negative energy. The path was wrong. It shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here. And the tracks, something human or not quite human. What did that even mean? The wait for our guide seemed an eternity. Finally, the crunch of snow and relief whooshed out of me in a sigh as the guide appeared at the mouth of the opening and called, "It's safe. Everyone come on." Dee bolted ahead. Damien and Chantal followed. The guide called again, the same phrase. "It's safe. Everyone come on." But her hands were moving. The others probably thought she was signing, "Let's go." Looking back, I wish I'd had more experience. Wish I'd trusted my eyes more, because maybe then I would have shouted a warning. If I'd been a more experienced interpreter, could I have stopped what happened? I don't know. I was still trying to make it all out, confused because my ears and eyes contradicted each other. Her voice said, "It's safe. Everyone come on." But the pointer finger of her right hand slid between the splayed fingers of her left and jerked outward, a motion that looked as if her pointer finger were escaping. "Run! Run! Run! Don't follow her," I shouted. Too late. Dee and Chantal had already gone in. Damien was slower and cast one look back at me before plunging into the dark after his son. Now there was only me. The guide looked at me, her face contorted, lips pulling back over teeth and gums. For a moment, she looked like a long-ago rotted corpse. The flesh withered away. Then I blinked, and she was smiling, an ordinary smile. Her hands lifted, spasmed, and shook, and then instead of telling me to escape, her arms gestured stiffly like those of a marionette. "Come." Now her voice and gestures matched as she said, "Come on." I fled. Reaching the parking lot, I was stunned to find a group mingling in the snow. A young deaf woman with long black hair stood at the front of the group, signing angrily at her phone screen. "Hey," I waved at her. "Hey, are you from the wilderness group? I need help." "Oh, finally." She whirled to face me, demanding to know why I was late. Her hands flew fast. So fast. Flustered, I interrupted, trying to explain to her about our guide. Lailani. "What the hell are you talking about?" She interrupted my spelling the name to sign to me. "I am Leilani." "What?" So who had I been interpreting for? It turns out the name sign I showed her, the L hand brushed against my cheek, belonged to a woman named Lorelei, who had previously been the trail guide and had mentored and later hired on Leilani. "Lorelei has been missing since last year," she explained. "She disappeared when she was taking a group out on the trail. She went to check some strange tracks and never came back." Last year, had the trek been on a Saturday, 10 a.m. instead of 11 a.m. My blood froze. Suddenly all the misunderstood details made sense. Leilani, the real Leilani, insisted I lead her to the fork in the trail where her mentor had vanished into the cave. We followed the crisp, clear prints in the snow all the way to the stream and up the crest of the hill. There was no longer any fork. In fact, no one's footsteps but mine emerged from the other side of the stream. It appeared as if I had gone up the slope, turned myself around in a circle a few times up there, and then run along the path, looping back to the parking lot. But as we got back to the parking lot, I noticed something. In the crisp snow, the impressions our boots had made were clear. There were mine, Damien's, Dee's, and Chantal's, big boots, little boots, all with differing treads. But as for Lorelei, I couldn't find any boots matching the ones I'd seen her wearing. The final set of prints among our group from the parking lot, shuffling around in the place where Lorelei had stood, were barefoot with elongated toes. I've been camping in the woods for 2 weeks. Yesterday I found a horse. I don't think it was normal. I've been camping in the woods for 2 weeks, long enough for the world outside to feel distant, unreal. My food supply is running low, but I don't mind. Out here the quiet is intoxicating. I spend most of my time wandering through the woods, probably straying further from my tent than is actually advised. I can't help it. I want to forget society exists, and sometimes I find cool stuff. Yesterday I found a horse. At least I thought it was a horse at first. It stood in the clearing, framed by skeletal pines, its coat impossibly white. The air around it shimmered, like heat rising off asphalt. Its mane was long, silken, and a twisted horn jutted from its forehead, reflecting the dull light of an overcast sky. That's when I realized, holy shit, that's a unicorn. My first thought, insane, childish, felt like a dream breaking through reality. There was no way it could be anything else. It looked just like every depiction of the white equines I've ever seen. It was magnetic to look at, drew me in, made me want to talk out there and see just how soft that fur was. Thankfully, I saw the carcass before leaving the tent. A bear, ripped open from throat to belly, its insides spilled onto the pine needles. Steam still rose from the glistening ropes of intestine. The smell, thick, coppery, raw, curdled my stomach. The unicorn dipped its head, muzzle dark with blood, and bit deep into the bear's ruined chest. It tore away a chunk of meat, the wet sound of it nearly sending me to my knees. I should have run. I should have backed away slowly, silently. But I stood frozen, breath stuck in my throat. I had never seen anything so grotesque. The picture of innocence devouring the flesh of something it had to have killed itself. As I watched, the unicorn shoved its muzzle into the soft, blood-wet folds of flesh. There was an awful squelching sound as it rooted around. When it straightened back up, thick strands of rapidly cooling blood dripped from velveteen lips and onto the needle-thick floor below. Its ears flicked, once, twice, and then it turned toward me. Its eyes weren't a horse's eyes. They weren't even an animal's. They were black, deep, endless voids, too large, too knowing. Strings of flesh clung to its teeth, and when it chewed, I could hear the wetness of the sound. I stumbled backward, my boot snapping a branch. The creature's ears flicked, and it took a step toward me, hooves pressing into the wet earth, leaving behind something darker than mud. The scent of decay rolled off it in waves, suffocating, like an open grave. I turned and ran. Branches whipped my face, roots clawed at my ankles, but I didn't stop. Behind me I heard it move, slow at first, then faster. A steady, measured trot, the sound of hoofbeats echoing through the trees. I don't know how I made it back to camp. I don't remember how I got inside my tent, hands shaking so violently I nearly ripped the zipper. I spent the night curled in my sleeping bag, buck knife clutched to my chest, heart hammering against my ribs. There was a moment around midnight where I swear I could hear hooves moving again, but nothing trampled my tent. This morning, I forced myself outside. The woods were silent. No birds, no wind. The trees loomed too close, their bark split and weeping something dark. It only took a second look to realize that something thin and sharp had been scraping into the trunks, leaving behind deep gouges. My stomach twisted into tight knots. The forest no longer felt like a safe haven or a way to escape the crash of reality, especially not when I stepped further into the morning light and saw the hoofprints circling my tent. I left. It didn't matter how much I had loved the quiet or how badly I had wanted to escape society. None of it mattered anymore. Something was out there with me. That creature had circled my tent in the night, and I wasn't about to wait around and see what happened next. My hands shook as I tore down camp, stuffing my sleeping bag into my pack and rolling up my tent with frantic, clumsy fingers. I left behind anything that slowed me down: food, cookware, even my extra clothes. I slung my pack over my shoulders and took off down the trail, moving fast, too fast, my boots slipping against damp leaves. I didn't look back, not until I heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow at first, then faster. I spun around, heart hammering, and caught a flash of movement between the trees, white shifting between the skeletal pines. My body moved before my mind caught up. I grabbed the knife from my belt and threw. The blade spun, glinting dully in the weak morning light. Then it sank deep into something soft. The sound that followed was not human. A shrill, keening wail tore through the woods, sharp enough to send ice racing through my veins. My breath caught as I took an involuntary step forward, stomach twisting. It was small, smaller than the one I had seen yesterday. Its coat was white but dull, streaked with dirt and dried blood. Its huge, black, endless eyes locked onto mine, and something in them made my chest constrict. The knife was buried in its throat. Blood welled up, dark and slow, spilling over its chest in thick, sluggish rivers. Its legs trembled, buckled. Then it collapsed. I didn't stay to watch it die. I ran. I fucking ran. The hoofbeats didn't follow, but I felt something behind me, something massive and furious, pressing against my back like the weight of a coming storm. The drive back to civilization was a blur. My hands shook so badly, I nearly veered off the dirt road. Now I'm sitting in my car at a gas station, typing this out, trying to calm my breathing. I think I saw a unicorn in the woods. I think I killed its child. So, what do you think the chances are that this ends badly for me? I used to receive singing lessons in the woods. When I was 11, I started taking singing lessons. I had wanted to for a long time, but my parents had never been able to afford them. Thankfully, I would end up receiving them for free when I met Mr. Vespers. My childhood home was located on the outskirts of a larger town where houses were few and far between, surrounded by intermittently dense woodland. We had a garden where I could often be found entertaining my younger siblings. I didn't have many friends at school, so I was basically always at home. I got on okay with my little brother and sister, so I often had to play the babysitter when my parents needed some time off. Ironically, they trusted me to take care of them over my older sister. I was doing just that when Mr. Vespers first happened upon me. The aforementioned younger siblings, Viola and Reed, were really giving me the runaround that day. Viola had somehow managed to climb atop our swing set and was refusing to come back down. She laughed and kicked her little legs, skillfully wrapped around the wooden bar from which the chains connecting to the swing seats hung. I didn't care to compliment her on it. All I could think of was how much trouble I'd get into if she fell down and got hurt. Soon enough, she realized that she was in a position of great power up there. "Hey, sure, I'll come down if you do a handstand," she hollered. I did, clumsily, and while this seemed to please her, she still wouldn't climb off. "Now do a cartwheel." I tried and failed. Reed, who was sitting beside us on the blue roof of his little white playhouse, clapped nonetheless. "Now sing," loud, Viola ordered. Knowing there was no disobeying her, I filled my lungs with air and began. There's this one old song that she hated because it made her terribly sad, so I chose to sing that. I hoped it'd lead to her getting tired of her nonsense, but instead, she started crying right there on top of the structure. I was on the brink of despair and considering where to get a ladder from, when I suddenly heard the gate in the fence swing open and footsteps drawing closer. Upon turning around, I found a complete stranger approaching us. He was a bit taller than Dad and wore a pristine camel hair coat. His face was framed by sleek brown hair and a cropped beard. He looked like a pop star, but fancier. The unannounced entrance of a man I'd never seen before should have certainly given me a start, but something about him put me right at ease. Sure, he had ventured onto our property without even asking first, but how could I be alarmed when the look on his face was this gentle? "Hey sir," I said. "If you're here to see my parents, they're not home." "Yeah, I know, I was a pretty stupid kid." "Oh, I don't know your parents, Tablet." His voice was deep, rich, and smooth, with all the resonance of a thunderclap. It was nearly enough to help me ignore the borderline insults he'd just thrown at me. Toadlet. I bit the inside of my cheek. "Do you need help with the noisy one?" He stepped right up to the swing set, grabbed Viola and cautiously removed her from the bar before whirling her around once, causing a smile to reappear on her face. Then, he lowered her safely back to the ground. "Thanks, sir," I said. "Quite the climber," the stranger remarked. "Not the only one in the family with talent, though, apparently." "Toadlet, I came because of the musical performance you gave earlier. I heard you when I was walking by. Your voice is heavenly." "What?" "Nah." I paused. "Really?" "I so swear," he said solemnly. "Can I hear it again?" After awkwardly clearing my throat, I meekly pressed out a few more lines of the same song as before. Viola promptly started to cry again. The stranger's smile grew, genuine warmth, filling his eyes. It's wobbly, of course, and a tad brittle there at the end, but all in all, wonderfully harmonious. Sometimes, voices still change during a child's transition to adulthood. I hope yours won't. It's perfect. I seldomly received praise, so this made my heart skip a beat. "I could teach you. My name's Brio Vespers, by the way. In sheer, and we can afford lessons," I told him honestly. "It'd be free. How do you like the opera?" "Because that's my trade." You're disappointed now. I understand. I can't imagine a kid like you being fond of the more classical side of music. Not really. I've only ever seen them on TV though, but maybe they're cooler in person, I offered. Mr. Vespers grinned. "Or when you're the one singing them. Besides, I could teach you all sorts of other songs." "That'd be kinda cool," I admitted, heat creeping into my cheeks. I didn't quite trust him though. Despite the odd feeling of safety he somehow conveyed, I wasn't completely blind to how sketchy this was. "You're gonna have to talk to my parents." "When are they due to be back?" "An hour or two?" I shrugged. "I guess you can wait here." "I'm in no hurry," Mr. Vespers said agreeably. "You should sing," Reed piped up. "You are a real singer, no? I want to hear." "Operatic bass." "Yes," the stranger confirmed steadily. Reed obviously had no clue what that was, but he started clapping wildly nonetheless. I believe even Mr. Vespers found it charming, as he indeed began to sing. It was in another language, and even though I couldn't understand it, each word that left his lips shook me to my core. His voice seemed to vibrate and tremble. I imagined he could have made the ground shudder beneath our feet if he wanted to. Viola started crying harder. Reed was still clapping, only slowlier. Mr. Vespers finished with a little bow. Reed yelled for an encore while Viola ran to hide in the playhouse. "Ignore her." That was awesome. I don't blame her, Toe, but I can be awfully frightening. There was a twinkle in his eyes I couldn't quite interpret. He wound up perching atop Reed's playhouse and partook in our playing, pretending to be a dragon, hissing and roaring at the squeaking children from up above. When my parents returned from their day out, they were more than a little confused. Still, it seemed that Mr. Vesper's uncannily soothing aura was working on them as well. "What would those lessons look like?" Dad asked as we were later sitting together in the living room. He was holding the business card Mr. Vespers had handed him, not actually reading it. "Would you teach her here at home?" "I absolutely could if that works best for her." "I meant, could you take her somewhere else? Because I really don't want that noise around here," Dad interrupted him. Mr. Vespers frowned. "No problem." "And you're doing this for free? What are you getting from it?" "I'm a kind soul who appreciates talent," the singer replied without hesitation, a lion's grin curling his lips. "Besides, if your daughter were to make a career off of her voice, that'd be beneficial to me as well." "I guess it's fine then. Gonna get her out of our hair for a bit." "You're awfully kind," Mom agreed, casting a sparkly-eyed gaze at an uneasily squirming Mr. Vespers. "And you're really a professional. If you didn't think I was, wouldn't you have thrown me out by now?" My parents exchanged puzzled glances. "What do you mean?" "Never mind." From that day on, Mr. Vespers became a firm constant in my life. He'd pay us house calls every other day. Sometimes he'd take me on field trips to the opera or the ballet, though any interest in these plays on my end was only ever feigned. It was kind of nice though, sitting side by side with this odd fellow who, despite his eccentric nature and brusque ways, seemed to somehow care about me. He paid for my tickets, intermission snacks, and post-show meals of my choosing, trying so hard to excite me for the plot and the history of works such as Tosca, Die Walküre, and La Traviata. To me, they were all either dreadfully boring or depressingly dark. It didn't help that the screens on which the surtitles were shown sometimes merely displayed the Windows error message. His biggest success on that front was to get me semi-excited over Die Zauberflöte. I told him the music was sorta catchy and he was smiling over that all night. "I think the cheerful fantasy plays are better," I explained to him across the dirty McDonald's table we were sitting at for our traditional dinner that night. "I love fairy tales, so I appreciate a bit of magic. Plus all of the others are just so sad. I want something. I fumbled for words. "Life-affirming?" Mr. Vespers offered, and I nodded eagerly. "Well," he went on, "that's an understandable preference, but all things considered, aren't you kind of drawn to dark themes? Sometimes. I guess I like creepy myths and horror stories. But no sad stuff. Toadlet, please close your mouth when you're chewing. I'm a patient man. I can wait for your answer till you've swallowed." He pulled a face. "Anyways, it's good you're such a mirthful soul, but it's also quite surprising. I mean, your parents clearly don't care all that much about you. You're constantly being burdened with the responsibility of caring for your baby siblings." "They're not babies," I contradicted him, "and Mom and Dad care. They just don't show it sometimes. It's okay though, they have a lot of work on their hands cause of us. If you ask me, it's still their work, not yours." He fell silent, tilting his head at me. A forced smile curved his lips. "Never mind, eat your garbage." Sometimes, when we were walking side by side, I'd puff my chest, lift my head and pretend I belonged with him. I'd call him Dad in my head. Sure, he was always a bit condescending. His nickname for me stuck, even though I told him a dozen times to drop it. His confidence in my skills, his patience with me. I felt more validated by that than by any decent grade at school. God, how I wished he were my family. I think he could tell. Of course, we weren't always out and about. When we actually practiced our singing, we did it in the woods, of all places. At first, this rather confused me, and I was hesitant to follow him each time he tried to lead me past the tree line. Now I know how this sounds, and no, nothing like that ever happened. Mr. Vespers never did anything to make me feel uncomfortable. He understood my concerns, and thus we stayed around the forest's edge in the beginning. I didn't get why the woods were so important to him anyways. He attempted to explain it to me multiple times, but it was always so weird and cryptic. Something about the trees needing to hear us. You'll find out soon enough though. The day I followed him into the woods for the first time would go down as one of the weirdest and most wonderful of my entire life. Can you feel how everything here responds to you? Mr. Vespers asked, voice husky with excitement. These are my woods. Never forget that. What do you mean, your woods? He let out a soft chuckle. Then he set his voice singing, a light ballad that lingered in the air with a soft reverence I hadn't thought his dark tones to be capable of. To my utter bewilderment, the branches of the trees around us started bending down, fanning out as if to try and get closer to him, to touch him. Flowers suddenly sprung from the ground where he stepped, the grass stretched to reach him, and vines slithered down their respective tree trunks in greeting. I was dumbstruck. I followed him until we reached a sunny little grove where he discarded his coat and placed it on the ground for us to sit on. The soil would never stain my belongings, Mr. Vespers explained casually, like that was what I'd been wondering about. What is this place? Why, you've known it for a while, haven't you? Your house isn't far from here. Yes, but I couldn't find the right words. Mr. Vespers seemed rather pleased with my reaction. These are my woods, Toadlet. I keep them alive. I make them grow. With your voice. He nodded, his eyes sparkling. So what are you? This isn't exactly normal, is it? I asked, trailing my fingertips along the soft material of the coat. I was too nervous to meet his gaze. Our normal familiarity mixed with the primal fear of a soft, vulnerable child in the presence of a force beyond understanding. Every fiber of my being told me to run, but Mr. Vesper's fatherly gaze gently asked me to stay. It's not normal. No, he chuckled. And as for what I am, I'm human enough to walk and work among you. So that's all you really need to know. Are you afraid of me now, Toddlet? Yes, I admitted. But you know I'd never hurt you, right? This is still a lot. I understand, and I have to make another little confession. Where I'm from, we love artists, especially aspiring ones, such as yourself. We want to bless you. We want to see you thrive. Look at me, sure. Do you see now? I whipped my head up. It suddenly made sense. So much about him made sense now. His pacifying aura, his sharp tongue, his mesmerizing voice. I felt a thrill unlike any other. This was what my love for the unusual and the mythical had amounted to. Yura, Mr. Vespers interrupted me by quickly laying a finger over my lips. A fae. Shush, he hissed, pressing his finger in a little harder. There was a mirthful smirk tugging on his face, though. Don't you say it. For some reason, I started giggling. A lot. This made Mr. Vespers laugh, too. Don't say it, you hear. Why not? I gritted out. It's so cool. Sure, you little freak, he snickered, finally removing his hand. So you're not afraid anymore, huh? No, I answered steadily. Still want me to teach you? Absolutely. So that's how we carried on. I soon learned not to prod my teacher with too many questions about his nature. We actually avoided the topic a lot of the time. It went unspoken but never forgotten. He taught me to sing to flowers, to motivate bugs and birds to dance along, and to make vines and branches bend my way. Most of the time we only practiced simple songs and ballads that didn't require too big a range. I just couldn't pull off the airs he tried to teach me. My favorites were the lullabies though. I know, a little underwhelming, but they always came easy to me. To practice them, Mr. Vespers would fetch us a bunny and I would have to sing it to sleep. That was quite difficult in the beginning. Mr. Vespers and I sometimes sang duets. My voice, being generally high in pitch, mingled beautifully with his booming rich bass. Those were the good years. Mr. Vespers soon offered to call him Brio. I think by then he knew how important he'd become to me. He indulged me. In fact, he'd even comfort me whenever someone made fun of me at school. That happened quite often, seeing as I always stayed the ugly duckling. Yup, they say you grow out of it, but I didn't. I still look like a whole mess. Brio said it didn't matter. Sure. You have an angel's voice. You can't have one's looks too. That'd just be unfair. He'd always tell me in that winning way of his. That was all it took for me to cheer up. His was the only opinion that really mattered. As long as he was pleased with me, so was I. Life was good, and it remained that way until the day of the concert. When Brio asked me to sing in front of some of his friends, I was flattered. He'd sort of let on that the people listening wouldn't be normal. I assured him I'd be on my best behavior, and he said he knew. The concert was in the woods, on a lovely afternoon in early fall. The leaves had already started to turn brown, but the air was still pleasantly warm and rich with the scent of dewy grass and flowers. When Brio led me to the location of the concert that day, the audience had already arrived. 6 people were lounging in the shade cast by the tall trees around us. They greeted Brio with hugs and handshakes and examined me with the same interest an entomologist might regard a newly discovered bug with. "So you're the little lady we've been hearing so much," a remarkably tall and pale woman said as she gently took my hand in hers. "What's your name, sweetheart?" I was about to respond when Brio cut me off. "You may call her Toadlet, like I do. She has no obligations towards you. You don't need to know her name." The woman smiled frostily. "I have no ill intentions towards the child." "I believe you, but I'm afraid I must insist," Brio replied with a strained grin. Bending down to whisper into my ear, he told me, "I'm just being careful. No need to worry." "I thought they were your friends. Why do you need to be careful?" I asked in a low voice. "The concept of friendship is flexible where I come from. Still, you don't have to be alarmed. Just sing, and give it your all." We had prepared several pieces for this esteemed crowd, among them, the Ballad of Tom Lynn, Erlkönig, which by the way was what Brio had sung the first time we'd met, though my rendition of it was hardly comparable, and Greensleeves. They were incredibly well received, but more than any of the applause, I appreciated how my teacher was beaming with pride. "Well?" he asked loudly, turning to face the audience with a smug grin. "Is she all I talked her up to be, or what?" "She certainly is," one of the gentlemen replied, paying me a nod. "She'd do nicely at court someday." "Court?" I inquired. Brio waved me off. "That'll be her decision to make when she gets older. For now, I want you to omit mention of the court and of the king and queen. Let's cherish her art for what it is, and not pressure her with future prospects," he commented pointedly. Despite this, I was already getting kind of excited. Court, king and queen. I had an inkling of what they were talking about. The tall woman too appeared to be impressed. Knowing she was about to give praise, I looked at her expectantly. "Why, she's perfectly adorable, a trill like a bird's. How she can go from such a cheerful warble to these sorrowful tones she treated us to when presenting Greensleeves is beyond me. You are a great teacher, dear Brio. Then again, I'll bet she's drawing from experience as well. Tell me, Toadlet, have you ever experienced heartbreak? Not melancholy nor glumness, but true, genuine heartbreak?" She leaned forward, a glint in her eyes. Brio frowned in confusion, eyes darting between her and myself. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to answer or not. The woman's stare made me nervous though. I had to say something. I had to break this alien silence. "No, ma'am." She smiled that same icy smile. It widened when she turned to face Brio. "Well, I think your student is a wonderfully talented young lady. With a little more training, she'll surpass you in no time. I believe she has already. Her voice is so youthful and lively." I watched my mentor's reaction closely. I might not have paid a comment like this any mind at all. It was an odd comparison, but a compliment nonetheless. Brio's face, however, changed at these words. When he met my gaze, his eyes had hardened. The pride within them had been replaced by something else, something that frankly sent shivers down my spine. He didn't walk me home that evening like he usually did. He didn't come to pick me up the next day, or the day after that. As a matter of fact, I never saw Mr. Vespers again. I was sick for weeks afterwards. I could barely eat, and whatever meager contents my stomach did have left inside, I threw up. My belly simply hurt that much. I cried myself to sleep every night that followed, not just sobbing but full-on wailing. But that stopped when my big sister came to bang on my door, yelling at me to shut the fuck up, and that I was keeping the entire house awake. Nobody noticed when I started skipping school. The only class I ever showed up to was Mrs. Langtree's, my music teacher. She was the one who eventually caught on that something wasn't quite right with me. She sent me to the school counselor, who asked me whether all this acting up was a cry for attention. I said it was, but not for hers. I ended up dropping out. Mrs. Langtree, however, introduced me to her musical theater group. They took me on. and soon enough, acting and singing for them became my job. That was the one thing I was grateful for, the one thing that went right. When I wasn't on stage with them, I earned a living with gigs in live music bars and pubs. I moved out of my parents' place and into a shared apartment. Life wasn't always comfortable, but it was good enough. I never meant to leave the woods behind though. I'd still take the bus to the outskirts of town nearly every weekend to wander the forest in search of my old mentor. I called out for him. I even sang for him, all by myself. The vines and branches still bent and stretched towards me though. Sometimes I heard his voice booming through the trees in the distance, but though I chased after it, I could never find its source. I refused to give up though. He had to be there. He had to come see me eventually. Our connection couldn't possibly have been erased entirely by his pride, right? That notion changed one night when I was home alone. I had visited the forest earlier that same day and was now wallowing in my disappointment once again. I'd been fixing myself a snack in the kitchen when the sound of glass shattering had me whirl around. I was instantly on high alert, grabbing both my phone from the counter and a large kitchen knife, just in case. The weather outside was frightful, so there was a possibility that a window had been somehow broken by the storm. I had a bad feeling about it though. The noise had come from my own bedroom. I was sure of it. I drew closer to the door with bated breath, my legs moving much slower than I wanted them to. My knees felt like jelly. I was only being paranoid, I told myself, pulse throbbing in my ears. I reached for the door handle. That same moment, the door flew open and a figure lunged at me, knocking me down. My head connected painfully with the hardwood floor, and I let out a sharp scream. I found myself face to face with a young, watery-eyed man. Before I could make a sound, he'd wrapped his fingers around my throat, hesitantly starting to apply pressure. Panicking, I started thrashing around, frantically trying to stab him with my knife, but failing to land a hit. "Stop struggling, please," the boy gritted out, struggling to keep his grip on my neck. "Let go," I whimpered, horrified at feeling the strain of not being able to breathe in. "I need air. I need." "I'm sorry," he wailed. "I have to do this. Please just stay still." Like hell I would, gripped by wild, naked terror. I started kicking my legs, causing him to land on top of me. He made an attempt to get back up, but I rammed my knee into that delicate soft spot between his legs. He cried out, and I managed to roll him off me. Fueled by pure adrenaline, I scrambled into a crouching position and placed one foot on his stomach, mercilessly pressing down. "Who are you? What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I owe Brio Vespers," he yelled out, grunting in pain. My face fell. "You what?" I asked breathlessly. "I owe Brio Vespers," he repeated, squirming beneath me. "He made me come here. He said I had to get rid of you." "He told you to kill me?" "I'm sorry, but I have a debt to pay." "I don't care about your kind's debts," I said. How my voice came out so steady, I'll never know. I felt like someone had stabbed me in the gut with a maypole. Did Brio watch me when I came to his woods? Every time. I took a deep breath. My head was spinning, twisted by a ton of washed-up pain, grief, and weirdly enough, frustration. "Please don't kill me," the boy begged in a brittle voice. "I swear I'm not a murderer," but I had to do what he said. He was forcing my hand. "Is this something you can control? If I let you get up, will you come at me again?" I asked sharply. "No, mistress," he whined. "You have my word, mistress." I let go of a deep sigh, staggering to my feet and reaching up to massage my throbbing temples. "Why does he want me dead?" I asked. "You've been singing in his woods. The trees were listening. They still know you." Brio's getting on in years, though he tries not to show it. It's not just that he's jealous. He's scared of being replaced. He's scared that the trees want you now, and that warrants a death sentence. The boy looked at me like he didn't rightly know how to respond. "Tell you what, I'll let you go if you do me a favor." He leaned forward, eyes wide. "Go back to Brio," I said. "Tell him if he wants me dead, he better come and get his soft-ass hands dirty. Can you give him that message?" "Absolutely. Anything else?" "Tell him I don't want his goddamn woods." I would have never begun to compare myself to him. I was a kid and I fucking loved him, and I would have done anything to do him proud. If he wants to go on like Snow White's evil stepmother, he can be my guest, but I'll burn down the whole lot of those trees if he chooses war. As for me, I won't go back there, so he'd best just leave me alone. The boy blinked. Could you write that down for me?" "That's basically the note we said our goodbyes on." I sent him off with the letter for Mr. Vespers and haven't heard back since. I guess that's a good thing. It's been nearly 3 weeks since. I was about ready to forget the whole thing, lay the past to rest once and for all. But the band and I had a gig yesterday night at this huge open-air event. It's still pretty warm out right now where I live, and there were some other bigger names performing, so there was an enormous crowd. I could only see the people up front clearly. All the others melted into a mix of shapes and colors in the background. I was more focused on my singing anyways. I found that when I'm in front of a lot of people, they turn into a single entity in my eyes. I like this entity. I want to please it, but I don't take the time to concentrate on the individuals among it. And I didn't yesterday. Everything was fine and great until we finished our last song and got ready to go off stage. I cast another glance at all these people, and that was when I noticed that one of them stood out. He looked like he didn't belong. He looked like he didn't belong. Real Vesper stood still as a statue between shouting, shoving, moving people. He met my gaze despite the distance between us. It was a mere moment. I was frozen. Our bassist, noticing something was off, hastily came over to me and pulled me along with her. If it hadn't been for her, I'd probably still be standing there, just staring. Before he disappeared out of view, I caught one last glimpse of my old teacher. He raised his hands to clap. Despite my better judgment, I went for a visit to the woods this morning. Fog was still hanging in the air and the sun hadn't yet come out. I didn't venture in, merely staying by the forest's edge with pricked ears. I could hear him. His voice was booming through the thicket. I'd never realized how eerie it truly sounded. My son brought something home from the woods. My husband and I always wanted our son to be adventurous. We wanted to watch him grow up, asking questions about everything, seeking out answers, and looking for adventure. It seems like whenever parents have a deep desire for how they want their children to be, their children instinctively know and go the complete opposite direction. As Sam grew up, he became very introverted and would actively ask when it was time for bed. He loved to sleep, and our doctor gave a lot of explanations. All the illnesses had been checked and crossed out before he said, "I think he just likes to get away from reality. He likes his dreams more than he enjoys life." This was at the age of 8. This actually depressed us as parents. What could be so wrong, so uninteresting about his life, that he would come home and just sleep? The doctor recommended that we plan family activities that were geared towards him as a way to engage him in life, give him something to be excited about after school. So, for our very first trip, we decided we would go on a hike. The mountains were about an hour away, and we considered this a mild introduction to our new family habit. When we told Sam where we were going, he was ecstatic. We knew then that hiking had been the right activity. On Saturday, we threw together some backpacks, lunch, water, and even a magnifying glass so Sam could inspect everything closely. He was so excited the entire way there. We were all thrilled. When we parked at the trailhead, Sam leapt out of the car and almost ran up the trail without us. I had to call him back so we could keep an eye on him. The hike was short, maybe half a mile, but Sam tried to run it like a marathon. We kept calling for him to come back and check out this bird, or this butterfly, or the log that looked like a grandpa's face. He would come and look to humor us, but then run ahead. Eventually, we gave up trying to point things out and let him just run through the woods. We were pleased that he had taken so well to the trip. For once, Charlie and I felt like we knew what we were doing as parents. Anyone who's a parent knows how that feels. We got to the end of the trail and ate our lunch. We were at a ledge along the mountain that was more like a hill. The sun was high overhead and we could see over the trees for miles. Sam quickly downed his lunch and we let him run off into the trees. "Not too far," I warned him. He obeyed, and we could always see him. From the rock where we sat, I watched Sam while Charlie went to the bathroom. I watched Sam pick up sticks, swing them at bushes and tree trunks until the stick broke, then pick up another one. He picked one up that was too short to be swung, but he smiled wide at it and ran around with it in front of him using both hands. Finally, he ran over to me and said, "Mom, feel this stick. It feels so cool." "Oh yeah?" I grinned, taking the stick from him. It was in the shape of a Y, and when I grabbed one of the sides of the Y, it was perfectly smooth. It looked like someone had taken a knife and whittled a bigger branch down into this smooth, slingshot-shaped stick. The two sides of the Y were curved, almost like bicycle handlebars. "That's very smooth," I said to encourage him. He looked at me funny, then ran back into the woods to keep playing. We packed up lunch, stuffed everything back in the backpacks, and announced that we were ready to hike back. Sam came back without a fuss, and we began walking down the trail. Instead of running ahead, Sam lagged behind, still clutching the wee stick. He held it in front of him with both hands as before, and was swinging it around slowly, as if it were a magnifying glass, and he were searching for something. "Come on, Sam," Charlie encouraged gently when he stood in one place for too long. We both had to stop because he had fallen so far behind. He was pointing his stick into the trees, arms outstretched. He kept looking from the stick to the trees, as if trying to line something up. We both waited patiently for a few seconds, but the heat was getting to us and we were ready for an air-conditioned car. "Sam, honey, let's go," I called. "Okay," he called back, but didn't move. Charlie sighed and walked back to him. He put his hands on both of Sam's shoulders and guided him down the trail. The whole time, Sam kept both hands firmly on the stick and tried his best to point it back towards the trees where he'd been looking. He didn't point it towards where he had been standing. I noticed later, but at a spot past the trail and into the trees, always at one position. Charlie finally got him to where I was, and we kept walking. Sam eventually stopped pointing his stick and instead kept it down in front of him, both hands still being used to hold either side of the wah. We drove home, pleased that Sam was taking home a souvenir. Our day trip had worked. He was getting involved with life. We were one step closer to our adventurous son. Over the next couple of days, lots of things started happening. They all seemed disjointed and not connected in the moment. Later, memory would connect them for me. Sam went back to his sleeping routine. He would come home from school, go into his room, and play for a bit by himself while dinner was being made. I got him to work on homework, then served dinner when Charlie got home. After that, he went straight to bed by his own choice. This wasn't abnormal for him, so I wasn't any more concerned than usual. A few nights after we got home, I noticed that Sam's bedroom light was on even though he'd gone to bed hours ago. His door was closed, so I went to go and turn off his light for him. I figured he might have left it on when he fell asleep or something. The second I opened the door, Sam leapt off the floor and jumped into bed like he knew he was in trouble. It was only 7 in the evening. I wasn't about to yell at him for not going to bed when he said he was. His rapid jump into bed had me worried though. "Sam, what's up?" "Nothing," he said in that kiddish tone that screams I didn't do anything. I looked around the room and saw what I always saw. His toys were out and lined up in some game he must have been playing. Nothing was out of place or irregular. He jumped up as soon as I came in. "Anything wrong?" "No." "Okay," I said slowly, unsure of what else to say. He looked at me with untold terror in his eyes. "Are you sure nothing is wrong?" I pressed. "I can hang out with you for a bit if you want." He stared right through me, his eyes wide. It took him a few seconds to reply. "No, Mother. I'm going to bed now. See, can you turn out the light?" I blinked. He's never called me mother in his life. I should have pushed myself in and sat on his bed and talked until he admitted what was wrong, but I didn't. Charlie called my name and it distracted me. I wished him a good night, turned off the light, and shut the door. Talking later on with Charlie about it, Charlie thought that maybe he had somehow discovered masturbation, even at his young age. "When you rub around on the floor the right way, it just happens," Charlie told me. Apparently that was how he had discovered it. So I chalked the situation up to that. Sam also kept carrying that whale stick around everywhere. He always kept it within reach. During dinner, he kept it on the table. When I told him that sticks don't belong on the dining room table, he kept it on his chair next to him. He took it to bed and kept it next to his head. He even took it to school. I tried fighting him on it once, but he claimed he was taking it to show and tell. I was about to insist that he leave it home, but he looked like he might cry if I came down firm. So I let him on the condition that if his teacher mentioned it to me that I'd make him leave it home. He agreed. One day Charlie was taking out the garbage and the bag caught on the door jamb. The contents of the bag spilled all over the floor and he quietly cursed and went to get another bag. That was when he found about 20 of Sam's toys in the trash. They varied from stuffed animals to action figures. Confused, Charlie asked me if I had thrown them away or was punishing Sam for something. I told him no and was equally puzzled. Sam, for some unknown reason, had been throwing his own toys away. Together after dinner, we sat down with Sam at the table to ask about the toys. We saw it as a cry for help. "They were selected," he said in response. "They were doing a good enough job, so they were fired. Their time was up." Charlie told Sam that we don't throw toys away because they cost money and we don't waste things. Sam nodded, but I saw his hands clutch the sides of the UI stick tightly under the table. He was stressing. Something was going on. We ended the conversation on a light note, and Sam understood why we were upset. He promised not to throw away any more toys, then ran off to bed. I just remember thinking how strange the sentence was, their time was up. That was an adult's line, not something you hear from kids. Sam's school sent an email to all the parents. About 2 weeks after our hiking trip, the principal pleaded with parents to not let their children come to school if their child was sick, as there was a very serious flu going around the school. He even admitted that 5 teachers and 30 students had been sick over the last week alone. I showed it to Charlie, but he didn't find it as weird as I did. Hand sanitizer breeds superbugs. He shrugged. Just tell Sam to wash his hands more often. The final straw for me came a few nights later. It was a Wednesday night when I woke up for no reason. Charlie was snoring next to me, but in a lull between snores, I heard a whisper. Fear seized my throat, and I lifted my head off the pillow slowly to peer at the bedroom door. Someone moved in the dark, stumbling along. Someone small and short. Sam. Irritated, I got up and walked to the door. I saw Sam skip away, as if he were crossing a field of spiders and was desperate not to get any on his shoes. Sam, I whispered, walking out after him. I turned the corner into the family room, but he wasn't there. I heard bare feet race across the kitchen floor, and that made me angry. The little shit was hiding from me. I walked through the family room and noticed that the clock on the wall was way louder than usual. Or maybe I was hypersensitive because I was exhausted. When I entered the kitchen, Sam was facing me. He stood next to the fridge, and the small LEDs on it lit up his expression. He was terrified, and his little Y stick was pointed right at me. Sam, I hissed in annoyance. It's late. Go back to bed. I need water, he said, still looking at me with wide eyes. It was an obvious lie, but one not abnormal for kids caught up past their bedtime. Okay, then get some water, I sighed. Can you get it? He asked, still clutching the stick and pointing it my way. He must have seen my mom look, because he re-emphasized, please. I walked forward, and that's when I noticed that he pointed the stick around me. He was pointing at something behind me. I whirled around really fast and stared into the empty darkness of the family room. The clock was still noticeably loud. It sounded like a person saying the actual words. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. I looked around the room for a full 30 seconds. Nothing moved. What are you doing up, Sam? I asked, turning back to face him. He looked at me with real, true terror in his eyes. The stick was shaking in his hand. Sam, I hissed, snapping a little bit. It's not time yet, he stuttered, barely glancing at me. His gaze was transfixed beyond me. I'm not ready yet. For half a second, I wondered if he was pretending to sleepwalk. Then I wondered if he actually was sleepwalking. Then my tiredness washed over me, and I got irritable again. It's time for bed, I insisted, walking towards him. Still, he kept his eyes behind me and the stick pointed into the family room. Okay, he said, defeated as I approached. He took slow, unwilling steps towards the family room. I stood behind him, watching to make sure he went to bed. I saw his head look back and forth, scanning the room as he entered. He was looking for something. He looked back at me with uncertainty. Suddenly he screamed, "Mom, watch out." I instinctively whirled around, hands up, and ready to attack whatever was there. Nothing but darkness and the far kitchen wall. I ground my teeth and glared down at him. He was still shaking, pointing his stick into the empty kitchen. I was beyond annoyed now. The stick had been out of control for weeks. I think you need a break from this, I said, snatching the stick from his hand. No, he screeched. Sam practically leapt at me, but I jumped out of the way. This was the only way, I assured myself. This stick wasn't healthy after all. Taunt, he cried and yelled, following me through the family room and into the hall. All the attention that had pointed into the kitchen was now directed at me. He tried to jump and grab at the stick, but I held it above my head. I felt like a teenage older sibling, teasing my younger brother, but this was necessary. I regretted waking Charlie up, but I pushed my way into my room, tossed the stick onto the floor, and turned back to get Sam out. Give it to me, he demanded, without taking a breath. I pushed him out and shut the bedroom door. I flipped the lock on the handle and sighed. "What's going on?" Charlie mumbled. I took the stick away. He was playing with it all night, I sighed, coming back to bed. Sam was pounding on the door. I convinced Charlie that we should ignore him. let him tire himself out, and tomorrow we would lecture him. He verbally agreed, though I could sense that he didn't agree inside. It took an hour, but Sam gave up and we went to sleep. The next morning, my throat felt like I had swallowed sandpaper. The flu, of course. My stomach rumbled and rousted me out of bed. I found myself starting to run to the master bathroom after my stomach turned nauseous. I puked up spaghetti from dinner the night before. Stumbling out of the bathroom, I had to move aside for Charlie, who couldn't make it to the toilet and threw up into the sink. "Not you too," I sighed sympathetically. "I haven't been this sick since I was a kid," he moaned, rinsing his mouth out. I rubbed my eyes, still tired from Sam's ordeal last night, and got in the shower with the lights off, hoping it would help my light sensitivity. Charlie decided to call in sick and rest for the day. I got ready for the day so I wouldn't lounge around in my pajamas all day, feeling even more sick. When I was completely ready, I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped out. Sam was nowhere in sight, which meant he had gone back to bed. Good. "Sam, I hope you're getting ready for school," I said loudly. No reply. I went to his room and found the door shut as usual. I twisted the handle and pushed, but the door was stuck. "The hell?" I muttered quietly. Using my shoulder, I shoved hard against the door. I heard a clatter, then the door opened. As I entered, I saw three things right away. 1. A chair had been placed under the door handle, preventing it from opening easily. 2. The window was wide open, with the screen missing. And 3. Sam wasn't in his room. We called the police immediately after searching the house from top to bottom. If we hadn't called them, I have no idea where we would have started. Should we have driven around looking for him? Called his friends' houses to see if they knew where he was? The police were helpful, and I spent a miserable half day sitting by the phone, puking my guts out and worrying about Sam. The police were out driving around, searching for Sam with his picture taped to their dashboards. Charlie was dead asleep when I wandered into the bedroom, debating lying down, but I couldn't sleep while Sam was missing. The sickness would let me, of course, but the guilt of falling asleep while this was going on was too much. I saw the stick, which had landed partially under the bed when I threw it last night. All this because of a stick? Maybe the doctor was wrong. Maybe he did have something wrong with him, but it was mental, psychological. Maybe instead of a doctor, we should take him to a psychologist. In an attempt to stay awake, I decided to search the house for the 15th time. This time I carried the stick with me. "Sam," I said, loud enough to be heard while I walked through the family room, kitchen, and to the stairs. Maybe he was hiding in the storage room downstairs, maybe behind a few boxes. "Sam," I said again, "I have your stick. I'm sorry I took it. Please come out, Mommy is really worried. You aren't in trouble." I descended the stairs, and halfway down I thought I heard him reply. It was faint, far away. The words were impossible to make out. "Sam," I cried desperately, spinning around on the stairs to try and figure out if he was upstairs or downstairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a leg dart around the corner at the bottom of the stairs towards the storage room. My hunch was correct. I sped down the stairs and turned the corner. The door was closed. I tried to twist the handle, but he had locked it. "Sam, honey, open the door, please," I pleaded while reaching for the key at the top of the door frame. When he didn't unlock the door, I stuck the key in and twisted. The door popped open to reveal our pitch-black storage room. The room was in the middle of the house and had no windows. It contained our water heater and the control system for the heat and AC. The room was so large, though, that Charlie had built shelves for us to keep our seasonal decorations, our camping supplies, and extra food and water. "Sam," I said more quietly, feeling uneasy. Something about the room was getting to me. "How does the clock tick, Mother?" Sam said from somewhere in the room. I froze. The word mother made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Something's not right. Something's not right." Sam, see. "Come on out now," I stuttered. Light spilled in from the doorway, but it didn't illuminate enough of the room for me to search. I slowly stepped toward the center of the room where a string hung down from a single bulb in the ceiling. With one hand, I kept a hold of the stick. With the other, I reached out to search for the string. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there somewhere. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and at that exact instant, my hand brushed against hair. Long, greasy hair at my shoulder height. Sam wasn't that tall. The hair was tangled and long. I yelped and jumped back, startled by the door and the hair simultaneously. Sam giggled. "Do you know how the clock ticks?" It came from my left, along the wall. The hair had been to my right. What else was in here with us? I was paralyzed. I couldn't see a damn thing. My phone was upstairs, so I couldn't use that as a flashlight. The ceiling light was somewhere in front of me, and the door was somewhere behind me. Every time I started to reach out, I remembered touching the greasy hair and recoiled. "Charlie!" I called upward, hoping he could hear me, hoping he was awake. "Tick-tock, tick-tock," Sam said again. My brain instantly remembered the sound the clock had made the night before. It was the same voice. Faintly a voice, and faintly background noise at the same time. "Sam," my voice hoarsely whispered. I had to throw up again. I swallowed bile and felt one more time for the string. It brushed my hand and I jumped back before realizing that I was feeling string, not greasy hair. Resolutely, I launched my hand out and grabbed at the string. It swung into my hand and I yanked on it. Hard. The single bulb buzzed to life and something moved to my right. I screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw white and black. It's taken me a long time to place the shape, but now I'm certain. A deer's skull partially covered by stringy hair darted away from the light, circling behind me. In absolute terror, I squeezed my eyes shut and didn't dare open them. In the battle for fight or flight, I turned into the ostrich, burying my head and hoping it didn't see me. I started sobbing and wanted to run for the door, but I was too scared to open my eyes. "Mommy," Sam called from my left. I didn't respond, I was sobbing too hard. "Mommy, help. I'm stuck." Very, very slowly, I moved one finger and looked to the side. Sam was huddled up on the top shelf. I couldn't see his face, but I saw jeans and his favorite shirt. "So come down and let's go," I whispered. "I can't. It's going to get me," Sam whimpered. I tried hard not to sob again. "Come and get me, please," he begged. I fought through the terror and stepped toward the shelf, still covering my face and using a small gap in my fingers to navigate. When I reached the shelf, I closed my eyes and held my arms up. "Climb into my arms, Sam. I'll get you down and we'll go get your dad." My voice broke at the end. "I'm stuck. My shirt is caught," he cried. Okay, I said, trying to be brave for him. "Guide my hand to where it is and I'll get you loose." He paused. "It's at the back of the shelf. You can't reach." I bit my lip to stop its trembling. With both eyes still closed, I placed my hands on the top shelf and my foot on the bottom shelf. The stick was placed on the shelf so I could use both my hands. I hoisted myself up so I could reach and balanced precariously. "Where is it, honey?" I asked, refusing to open my eyes. "Reach here," he said, and I could feel him rotate so I could reach over him. I did, and my hand ran straight into a mess of tangled, greasy hair. My eyes opened in shock. It stared back at me for only a millisecond. In that millisecond, it spoke, not with words, but in my head. "Do you know how the clock ticks? It is fed by death." The shelf under my feet collapsed, and as I fell, my hands pulled the shelf until it toppled over, coming down on top of me. I woke up in the hospital, much to Charlie and Sam's relief. It was a tumult of information and questions. They asked why I was down there, and instead of sounding insane, I said that I'd been searching for Sam again, just in case. Sam had been found walking on the road in the general direction of the hiking spot. He wasn't very far, thankfully, and was unharmed. When Charlie practically yelled, asking why the hell he had left in the middle of the night alone, Sam said he needed to find another stick to stop the monsters. The police were, of course, recommending that he talk to a psychologist. It overheard the conversation. Charlie didn't wake up until the police were at our door with Sam in hand. That was about an hour after the shelf had collapsed on me. Sam and Charlie had gone looking for me in the house and found me under the collapsed shelving. The police had been right there, thankfully, and I was rushed off to the hospital. Some of my ribs were broken and so was my left leg. The shelf that had collapsed on me had held our camping tent, the fake Christmas tree, and a few other half-empty boxes. I was lucky that it wasn't the food storage shelving. The door was locked when they got to it, and the key wasn't in the lock, so they had to break it down. The second Sam saw the scene, he apparently stood over me in a protective stance, looking all around. Charlie left to get the police before they left upstairs. A couple of days after I got released from the hospital, and after Charlie had recovered from a flu that knocked him off his feet, I got to talk to Sam. I asked him outright what had been going on. It took a few minutes of him denying that anything was wrong. "I saw the monster," I admitted, which a parent really shouldn't do to their child. "You did?" he asked incredulously. I nodded. "You and Dad never saw them before. When did you see them?" "Them?" I asked nervously. Sam told me what had been happening for the last few weeks. He had stumbled upon the stick by literally tripping over it. It had spoken to him and he took it to play with it. Whenever he had the stick, he could see the monsters. They were scary, but they stayed away when I pointed the stick at them, he said. A few of them had followed us home, walking alongside us on the trail. They came into the house at night and snuck around. They came into Sam's room, our room, everywhere. They told me that someone had to die. They told me that you had to die. So, he offered the monsters toy sacrifices to satiate their hunger, but they were unsatisfied. Whenever I didn't have the stick, I could feel them try to grab me, but they stayed away whenever I had the stick. They kept telling me that your time was up. Whose time? Yours, Mommy. They sat with him at night and changed TikTok at him. They tried to convince him to put the stick down. They offered him candy that the big blurry man pulled out of thin air. At school, they followed him and said they would hurt people until he put away the stick. 5 teachers and 30 students got the flu while they threatened that. He held onto the stick as often as he could and patrolled the house at night to keep them out of my room. That was until I took the stick. Apparently he had grabbed the stick from a skeleton in the woods. It looked like an animal skeleton. He had seen another one just like it when he got the first one, so he was going to go back and get the second one so the monsters would stop smiling. One had followed him on the streets, he said. But now they were all gone, and after looking through the mess of the collapsed shelving, so was the stick. Sam told his psychologist about our conversation. His psychologist told me very angrily that I should not have admitted anything like that because it fed into his delusions. He was being looked at for possible schizophrenia. I'm thinking I should be tested too. How else do I explain everything that happened? One detail stands out that I can't explain. I had unlocked the door to the storage room and left a key in the handle. So why was the key found dangling from the light bulb string? I found a house buried in the woods. I'm sort of a nature guy. I say sort of because I'm not a nature guy, but I spend a considerable amount of time outside. It's mostly downloading music and going for hikes in my area, that sort of nature guy. That is why I consider myself fortunate that my backyard borders miles of forest. This is fortunate because I live in a very suburban area where most people are rationed only a few feet of neatly groomed yard. My backyard isn't large, but once I cross the threshold of brush and trees, I'm met with unearthed stones that create mock canyons. I get to walk along skinny, running creeks of water. Some of the rock formations are so colossal, the area where the rock meets the soil juts up and forms overhangs that I can sit under to get out of the heat. It really is a gift to have all of this behind my house. I had never had a reason to feel anything but serenity out there, but as of a few months ago, that serenity has taken on the guise of uneasy anticipation that something horrible happened out there. About 3 months ago, I went as deep into the woods as I had ever gone. I probably made my way through the trailless woods for about 3 hours. I was following a creek that was a stone or two away from being dammed up, but it muscled on anyway when something caught my attention. There was the base of a man-made stone structure. I went over to investigate. The structure was a dark gray rock that had patches of green moss running up it. I thought to myself that it must have been an old fire pit, or maybe a well of sorts, but what the hell did I know? There was no one around for miles, so the structure had to be really old. I was about to keep on following the creek when it clicked with me. The structure was a chimney, the top of a chimney. At first I was in disbelief. There was no way it could be that. I started to dig away at the base of the chimney, and it kept on revealing more and more chimney no matter how much dirt I moved away. I eventually got down on my knees and started moving the dirt away using a nearby rock to break it up. I went on, strangely invested in seeing its end when I struck roof shingles. Yes, a few inches below the dirt were the roof shingles. I didn't know whether to think it was cool or terrifying. I hadn't decided yet. I did know that I was going to come back with some towels and move more dirt away, because at the time I hadn't been completely freaked. The next weekend I hiked back out to the house. The house had been on my mind almost obsessively. I made my way out with a newly bought pickaxe and a shovel from my garage. After a pretty rough few hours, I made it to the house. I was able to remember its location using the creek as a guiding reference. For the rest of the day, I dug at the ground at a grueling pace, yet sure enough, a full-size roof was being revealed. When I had just enough time to make it back before sundown, I decided to go back home, but I left the tools propped up on the chimney. I was exhausted and drinking some water I had brought when I noticed how eerily quiet everything was. No animal chatter, no wind, just the persistent trickle of the creek. No, there was one more sound. It was muffled, but I followed it. It was a radio, and it was coming from the house. I pressed up against the roof and listened hard. The hum of a radio could be heard inside the house. Someone had to be living inside the house. I suddenly felt a sense of dread. I felt a sense of being miles from home, and potentially not alone. I left immediately, and made a leg-numbing trek back to my house. About 2 months later, I went back one last time. Curiosity got the best of me, and I wish I could say that I was smart and forgot about it, but come on, could you forget about this? I made it out to the house. It was the exact same way I'd left it, tools and all. There was no radio playing though. I had gone out there early, so I had time. I got to work on digging out the roof. I dug a pathway to the edge of where I thought the roof would be so I could dig down the side of the house. Relatively quickly, I made it to the edge and began down. I worked fervently and with great focus until I had about an inch of window exposed. I stuck my head into the hole to press up against the tiny sliver of the window, but I couldn't make out anything. I dug for nearly an hour more until I had the window almost completely exposed. I pushed up on the window, and to my surprise, it slid open with ease as if it were new. The earth I was laying in fell away, and I tumbled down into the house. It was dark, but my eyes were adjusting. I sat up. The light outside illuminated the room a bit, and to my shock, the whole house was completely furnished and seemed like it was lived in and managed. The room I was in must have been a guest room. It was decorated in a very 2000s era fashion. Somehow the house had airflow too, and with my eyes now adjusted, I made my way to the bedroom door. I grabbed the knob and slowly turned it. The door didn't even creak as I peeked into the hallway. I couldn't see much, but I heard something. This time it wasn't a radio. It was someone crying. The hallway had off-white colored carpet flooring and a wooden staircase that led to the presumed first floor. Down the stairs I could hear the gentle cries of a woman. I froze up. I wanted to call out for her, but I knew I had crossed a personal boundary of mine hours ago when I decided to come out here. I must have been locked up for a minute or so when a new sound was born. Footsteps, and they were coming up the stairs fast. I quickly shut the door and made a hard turn towards the window. I scrambled anxiously up the dirt mound that had let itself into the room through the window. Whatever was coming after me had opened the door and was gaining on me, but did not make a sound besides the heavy footsteps. I got out the window and slid it shut right as something pounded up against it. The whole time the woman downstairs never stopped crying. I didn't stop. I climbed out of the hole and tore off through the woods. The whole way back I felt followed by a sense of hopelessness and dread. I don't remember much from the run back, but when I got home I passed out on my couch. I woke up a few hours later and the sun had set. I locked all of my doors and windows, scared that thing from the house would follow me, and then took a shower. As of now, nothing more has come of the house. I did call the police and reported the incident about a week ago, so I expect to hopefully hear from them soon. The uneasiness of my experience with that house has kept me out of those woods for good. In fact, I have kind of taken a hiatus on hiking alone. If there are ever updates, I can let you all know, but for now, that is everything. The kids of Orwin Woods. The job at the gas station was a blessing when they called me, but it would become something of a megrim before I finally quit. I worked the closing shift at the Fill and Go for the better part of 8 months, and it was 8 months of making coffee, stocking coolers, and listening to weary women with too many children argue about what you could and couldn't buy with EBT. My first job was construction, working as a carpenter's assistant since I was 16, and after the big layoff during the pandemic, I was tempted to go back. The amount of construction work hadn't changed, but the call for laborers had waned, it seemed. Suddenly, I was forced to look elsewhere for work, and my savings were starting to get dangerously low when the Fill and Go finally called me. The worst part about the job wasn't even the job itself, not really. The worst part was the walk home when the day was done. I lived in the Shady Oaks trailer court, about 3 blocks from the gas station, and it just made sense to walk to work. I didn't have a car. It was one of the first things to get repoed when I was out of work, so if I needed groceries or booze or a bite to eat, I was walking. It wasn't much of a problem, I liked to walk, but it was the sights that made the walk unbearable, especially at night. Walking past Orwin Wood in the middle of the night was enough to give anyone the shivers. Orwin Wood had existed long before the children's home that had given it its name, but the long-gone orphanage was why it was infamous. Established in 1890, Orwin Children's Home was a place for cast-off children from all over. The rambling plantation home, lovingly donated by Mrs. Orwin before she died, boasted 30 acres, complete with a barn, fields for growing, a pond for fishing and swimming, and a lot of room for rowdy, growing children. At its peak, it had held some 120 kids and had been a place of new beginnings and fresh starts for many lost boys and girls. Those were not the reasons it was remembered, however. The reason it was still whispered about in fireside stories was the fire of 42. By 1942, the orphanage had fallen into disrepair. They had some 30-odd children they were caring for, and the consensus was that the fire may have been set for reasons of insurance fraud. Others claim it was a candle that was left lit after bedtime or a stray spark from the fireplace. But however it was started, the results had been devastating. 30 people lost their lives in the fire, 25 of them children, and that was when the stories began. You could still see the ruins of the children's home as it hulked in the overgrowth, reclaimed by the forest after the blaze, and the area around the hulk was supposed to be haunted. Lots of people had seen ghostly apparitions, handprints in the dirt on their cars, or had toys glide into the road without warning. The Orwin woods played into a lot of local legends, and it was widely agreed upon to be a very haunted place. I explain all this so you understand why I might have been a little eager to get home on my evening walks. Nothing strange had ever happened to me, nothing besides that feeling of unseen eyes watching you, until last night. Last night, I got off work to find about a foot of fresh snow on the ground. It had been expected. I had watched it come down all day as I rang up coffees and gas for customers. I had walked to work through flurries earlier that day and had dressed accordingly. Still, I thought, as I pulled my hood up and turned to lock the doors behind me, that wouldn't stop it from being a cold, wet walk home. The dark gas station disappeared behind me as I started schlepping home, tonight's cigarette already between my teeth. It's a terrible habit, I know, but it's about the only vice I can afford to have these days. Tonight, however, I was having a hell of a time getting the tip lit. Every time I would lift my lighter to spark it, the wind would pick up and blow my little flame out. Cold as it was, however, the shiver that passed up my neck had nothing to do with it as I came even with Orwin woods. I tried not to look as I walked past. The forest a dark shadow on my left. Like almost any night, I could already feel those phantom eyes as they marked my passing, and I kept my gaze firmly ahead. My grandma had always told me that when you sense the supernatural taking notice of you, it's best not to let it know you see it. Some things don't like being seen, bug. Remember that, she would say, and it made a lot of sense on nights like tonight. I was still trying to get the cigarette to kindle, but the wind was keeping me from my evening smoke. I put a hand up to block it, but it seemed my fingers weren't even a good enough barrier for the capricious gusts. The unlit cigarette was a good distraction from the creepy woods, however, though maybe a little too good. If it hadn't been for the snow, I would have walked home without incident, but I supposed I could have also unknowingly let something follow me in too. Suddenly I was done with the games. I was jonesing for a smoke, and I bent almost double as I tried to spark the tip. 3 clicks and a lot of cursing later, I managed to get the flame to stick, but as I took that first long drag of gaseous pleasure, I noticed something beside me on the sidewalk. It was a pair of footprints. No, not just any footprints. A pair of children's footprints. I don't mean shoe prints either. I could count the individual toes on these prints, and there was a line of them beside my much larger ones. I didn't know when they had picked up my trail, and I didn't really care either. Whoever had made them had disappeared, and I looked around curiously. It was 23 degrees outside, so my phone said when I left the station, and I was looking for the kid bold enough to walk barefoot in the snow. There was no one though, and no footprints going hastily away from mine either. I was alone in the snow, though the fact that they had stopped right next to my own let me know I might not be as alone as I thought. I glanced back, wanting to see if I'd been mistaken, and that's when I saw the second set. They had stopped about 5 feet behind me, but they were just as plain as the first set. As the wind hit me again, I tried to keep my teeth from chattering. The chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather, and I found my eyes drawn to the new prints as they waited patiently for some sign. 2 perfect pairs of tiny feet, sitting placidly in the powder. Then before my eyes, a third set came crunching toward me, and my cigarette made an angry hiss as it hit the fresh snow. I was running before that third set came even with the second, and this seemed to be the sign they had been waiting for. I heard those bare feet as they slapped wetly at the concrete behind me. My head cried out for caution. It would be very easy to take a tumble out here and get hurt, but my desire to get away was up, and my adrenaline was coursing in the face of this formless threat. I slid as I rounded the corner, but my sneakers held purchase as I kept showing my heels. I could feel the burn in my chest as I ran, my breath steaming like a loco as I ran for my life, and I knew if they caught me, I would never see home again. None of the stories I ever heard about the woods spoke of the children hurting anyone, but by the sounds of their ghostly feet, I guess they weren't trying to sell me cookies. By the sound of it, there were more than a dozen after me, and I could just imagine the intentions of this legion. I saw the trailer park coming into sight, but that seemed to be where my luck ran out. I came off the curb, running flat out, and when I hit the patch of ice, I stumbled and went down hard on my outstretched hands. I was lucky, I suppose. If I had hit my head and gone unconscious, there's no telling if I would have ever woken up. As it was, I just gashed my hands on the concrete beneath. I could still hear them behind me getting closer and closer, and I walked on my hands and knees until I got across the street and managed to right myself. I was running up the narrow walkway, dashing between the trailers, as I saw my faded red one coming into sight. I prayed the stairs wouldn't be icy, and when my foot touched down on the first step, I was rewarded with a groan and the firmness of unfrozen wood. I darted up the steps, crossed the porch, and rammed the key into the lock as I frantically walked into the entryway. I sighed in relief. I was home, and nothing could hurt me here. I turned to slam the door, the screen door not feeling quite firm enough, but my hand stopped. I saw my breath as it came puffing out, and it felt as if it were thicker than usual. There were dozens of footprints in the snow outside my trailer. Some were in the yard, some were on the porch, but all of them led to my front door. It was as if all those kids had followed me home, each of them beckoning to be let inside so they could come out of the cold. I could just picture a dozen or more half-burnt children, the snow falling on their ruined skin, looking hopefully at me as if just asking for a place by the fire. It was all too much, and when I slammed the door shut, there was a note of finality to it. I made a mental note that night to try and find a new route home, but the situation, it seemed, fixed itself. I was awoken at 6 a.m. the next day by my boss, telling me that Dixie, his day manager, had called to tell him she quit that morning. Run off with her damn boyfriend, and good riddance, I say. You've been a solid night guy, but I figured I'd offer you a chance to come work days if you want. The position comes with an extra $3 an hour, but you'd have to start today. Interested? I was, and the forest seemed a lot less spooky in the daylight. I haven't encountered any more phantom footprints after that night, but I'll never forget how the ghostly mob chased me home one cold February night. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.